I was standing 5 feet away when my stepson signed my death warrant. He did not see me in the shadows of my own garage because he was too busy bragging on the phone to his mother, my wife. He laughed a cold, hollow sound that echoed off the concrete walls and said, "Yes, I cut the lines already, Ma. Tomorrow morning that old fool goes off the cliff at the curve on Route 9. Get your black dress ready because by noon you will be a rich widow." I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply backed out of the garage, called a tow truck, and had my death trap of a car delivered to my wife while she was getting her hair done. The note I left on the windshield read, "A gift from your son. You drive it home." 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was not an apology. It was the police. My name is Thaddeus King. I am 72 years old, and this is the story of how I survived my own murder. Before we dive into this nightmare, let me know in the comments where you are listening from. If you have ever had to outsmart the people who were supposed to love you, hit that like button and subscribe. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of gray, bone-chilling Chicago day that makes your old war injuries flare up. I was supposed to be at the hardware store playing the part of the retired, useless old man my family thought I was. They saw me as Thad, the guy who drove a beat-up Ford F-150 and wore flannel shirts stained with motor oil. To them, I was just a pension check and a house deed waiting to be inherited. They had no idea that the grease under my fingernails was a choice, not a necessity. They did not know that 40 years ago I started buying up abandoned industrial lots when everyone else was fleeing the city. They saw a mechanic. They did not see the owner of King Industries. But I kept that side of my life separate. I wanted to be loved for who I was, not for what I owned. That was my first mistake. I had come back to the house because I had left my heart medication on the kitchen counter. That little orange bottle was the only reason I doubled back. I pulled my truck into the driveway, killing the engine before I reached the garage door, so I wouldn't make a sound. It is an old habit from my days in the Marines, moving silently, observing before engaging. The garage door was cracked open just a few inches, enough for a slice of dim light to cut across the oil-stained floor. I walked up the driveway, my boots making no noise on the pavement. I was reaching for the handle to slide the door up when I heard it. Clink. Snap. It was the unmistakable sound of metal shearing against metal. It was coming from underneath my pristine 1969 Mustang, the car I had spent 5 years restoring. The car I drove every Wednesday to the VA hospital for my checkups. I slipped through the side door, the one with the hinges I greased myself just last week. The air inside smelled of gasoline and old rubber. I pressed my back against the cold metal of my tool cabinet, my heart hammering a rhythm against my ribs that had nothing to do with my medical condition. Underneath the Mustang, a pair of legs was sticking out. I recognized the expensive sneakers immediately. Jordan Retros, $300 a pair. I knew the price because I was the one who paid for them last Christmas. It was Dante, my wife Bernice's son, the boy I had taken in when he was 12, the boy I had put through private school, the man whose gambling debts I had quietly paid off more times than I could count, hoping each time would be the last. He slid out from under the chassis, holding a pair of heavy-duty wire cutters in one hand and his cell phone in the other. He wiped a streak of brake fluid onto his designer jeans and brought the phone to his ear. I held my breath, shrinking into the shadows. "It is done, Ma," he said. His voice was not shaking. There was no hesitation, no guilt. He sounded proud. "Yeah, the brake lines are clean cut. The fluid is already pooling. When he hits that downhill curve on Route 9 tomorrow, the pedal is going to go straight to the floor. No brakes, no steering, just a straight shot into the ravine." My blood turned to ice. He was talking to Bernice, my wife of 20 years, the woman who sat across from me at breakfast this morning and poured my coffee, the woman who prayed over our meals and sang in the church choir every Sunday. She wasn't just aware of this, she was orchestrating it. I couldn't hear her voice on the other end, but I heard Dante's response. "Don't worry," he continued, standing up and admiring his handiwork. "By the time they haul the wreck up, it will look like mechanical failure due to poor maintenance. Everyone knows the old man does his own work. They will say he got senile and made a mistake. You get the insurance money, I get my cut, and we are finally free of that cheap old bastard." Cheap. That word hung in the air like smoke. I had given them a home. I had given them stability. But to them, I was just a barrier standing between them and a payout. The Marine in me wanted to grab a tire iron from the bench and end it right there. I still had the strength. I could have broken him in half before he even realized I was in the room. But the businessman in me, the man who built an empire from a single welding torch, knew better. Anger is a liability. Strategy is an asset. If I confronted him now, it would be my word against his. He would claim he was fixing the car. He would claim I was crazy, the angry old veteran losing his mind. I needed to destroy them completely, and to do that, I needed to remain the victim. I needed to let them think they had won. I watched as Dante kicked the tire of the Mustang, laughing to himself. "See you at the funeral, Ma," he said, and hung up. I waited until he turned his back to put the wire cutters away, and I slipped out the side door as silently as a ghost. My hands were shaking not from fear but from a rage so cold it burned. I walked back to my truck, but I didn't get in. I walked 2 blocks down to the corner store and used the payphone. I wasn't going to leave a digital trail on my cell. I dialed a number I knew by heart. Big Mike's Towing and Recovery. Mike answered on the first ring. "Big Mike, this is Thad." "Thad." "What do you need, boss?" Mike asked. Mike was one of the few people who knew the truth about me. He knew I wasn't just a pensioner living on Social Security. He knew I owned half the industrial park where his shop stood, and that I had let him miss rent for 6 months when his wife got sick. Loyalty is a currency more valuable than gold, and Mike was loyal. "Mike," I said, keeping my voice steady, "bring the flatbed to my house. Park down the street around the corner where you can't be seen from the driveway. Wait for a silver sedan to leave. That will be my stepson. Once he is gone, come get the Mustang." "Is it broke down?" Mike asked. "No," I said. "It is a weapon. And Mike, I need you to drop it off at the Majestic Hair Salon on 5th Street. "The salon." Mike sounded confused. "Thad, are you okay? Just do it, Mike, and do it fast. I will meet you there." I walked back to my truck and waited. 10 minutes later, Dante's silver sedan backed out of the driveway. He was bobbing his head to music, probably celebrating his future inheritance. As soon as he turned the corner, I signaled Mike. We loaded the Mustang onto the flatbed in silence. I saw the puddle of brake fluid on the garage floor, a slick, dark stain that looked like blood. Mike saw the cut lines and looked at me, his eyes widening. He didn't ask questions. He just tightened the straps with a grim expression. We drove to the Majestic Hair Salon. It was a high-end place where Bernice spent $200 every week to look like the church lady she pretended to be. I knew she was there. She had an appointment every Tuesday at 3. "Drop it right in front," I told Mike. "Block the entrance." Mike maneuvered the massive truck and lowered the Mustang right onto the curb directly in front of the glass doors. It was a statement. It was undeniable. I took a piece of cardboard from the back of Mike's truck and a thick black marker. I wrote the note with a steady hand. Dante fixed the brakes. He said, "It is ready for you to drive home. Love, Thad." I stuck the note under the windshield wiper blade right at eye level. Then I told Mike to take off, and I moved my truck across the street into the parking lot of a grocery store. I had a clear view of the salon entrance. I sat there sipping a lukewarm coffee from a thermos and waited. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Finally, the glass door opened. Bernice walked out. She was wearing a salon cape, her hair wrapped in foils, looking ridiculous and vain. She was laughing at something the stylist said, looking carefree. Then she saw the car. She froze mid-step. Her smile vanished instantly. She recognized the Mustang. She knew it shouldn't be there. It should be in the garage waiting to kill me tomorrow morning. She walked towards it slowly, confusion warring with fear on her face. She looked down and saw the dark puddle forming under the wheel well. She knew exactly what that fluid was. Then she saw the note. I watched through my binoculars as she leaned in to read it. I saw her lips move as she sounded out the words. I saw the exact moment the meaning hit her. She recoiled as if the car were radioactive. She dropped her expensive leather purse on the sidewalk. Her hands flew to her mouth. She looked around wildly, scanning the street, scanning the parking lot. She looked terrified. She wasn't scared for my safety. She wasn't worried that her husband was driving a car with no brakes. She was scared because the game was up. She knew that I knew. She scrambled to pick up her purse, her hands trembling so badly she fumbled it twice. She pulled out her phone and dialed. I knew who she was calling. I let my phone ring in my pocket. Once, twice, 3 times. I didn't answer. I just watched her panic. I watched her realize that the old fool, the simple mechanic, the man she planned to bury tomorrow was still very much alive and one step ahead. But this was just the warning shot. They thought they were dealing with a helpless old man. They were about to find out they had declared war on the wrong person. I started the engine of my truck. I had to get home before she did. The performance of a lifetime was about to begin, and I needed to be on stage when the curtain went up. I sat in my truck across the street, the engine idling low, watching the scene unfold like a slow-motion car crash. Big Mike had done his job perfectly. The Mustang sat menacingly at the curb directly in front of the glass doors of the majestic hair salon. It looked innocent enough to the passers-by, a classic American muscle car gleaming under the afternoon sun. But Bernice and I knew better. We knew it was a 2-ton steel coffin waiting for a passenger. I watched Bernice through the windshield. She was standing on the sidewalk, clutching her purse to her chest, as if it could shield her from the reality sitting on 4 rubber tires in front of her. She looked around nervously, her eyes darting left and right, scanning the street for me, for Dante, for anyone who could explain why her murder weapon had been returned to sender. She looked like a trapped animal, cornered and trembling in her expensive heels. I picked up my phone and dialed her number. I watched her jump when her phone rang. She stared at the screen for a long moment, debating whether to answer. She was terrified. Good. Fear makes people sloppy. Fear makes them tell the truth without saying a word. She finally lifted the phone to her ear, her hand shaking so bad I could see it from 50 yards away. "Hello," she whispered. Her voice was thin, brittle. "Hey, baby," I said, keeping my voice smooth and casual, the affectionate husband calling his wife of 20 years. I tried to inject just the right amount of frustration into my tone, not at her, but at the situation. "Look, I am in a bit of a bind. I was driving the Mustang to get some errands done, and the starter began acting up right as I was passing your salon. I didn't want to get stranded in the middle of traffic, so I had Mike tow it to the curb right there." I saw her eyes widen. She looked at the car, then back at the street. "Thad," she stammered. "Thad, where are you?" "I am just down the block at the hardware store." I lied. Big Mike gave me a lift so I could grab a new solenoid. "But listen, Bernice, I need a huge favor. The car is running right now. I left it idling because if I turn it off, it won't start again until I fix it. I need you to hop in and drive it back to the house for me. It is only 3 miles. I will catch a ride with Mike later and fix it in the garage tonight." Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence on the line. I watched her face pale. The blood drained out of her cheeks so fast it looked like she had seen a ghost. She was doing the math in her head. 3 miles. 3 miles of city traffic. 3 miles that included the steep decline on 5th Street and the sharp curve near the elementary school. 3 miles in a car that she knew for a fact had 0 braking power because her son had severed the lines less than 2 hours ago. "Bernice." "You there?" I pressed, adding a touch of urgency. "Baby, I need you to help me out here. The meter is running on the tow truck and I don't want to leave the engine idling on the street too long. Just jump in and take it home." "I can't," she blurted out. It was too loud, too fast. She caught herself and lowered her voice, trying to regain composure. "Thad, honey, I can't drive that car. You know I can't." "Why not?" I asked, my voice innocent. "It is an automatic, Bernice. You have driven it a dozen times. Remember our anniversary last year? You drove us to the lake. You said you loved the power. That was different," she said, her voice rising an octave. "My shoes. I am wearing these new heels, Thad. They are 6 inches high. I can't work the pedals safely. It would be dangerous." I leaned back in my seat, a cold smile touching my lips. Dangerous. That was an interesting choice of words. "Baby, take the shoes off," I suggested reasonably. "Drive barefoot." "I don't mind. I just need the car home." "Come on, Bernice. It is just a 10-minute drive. Why are you making this difficult?" I saw her shift her weight, looking for an escape route. She looked back at the salon, probably wishing she could run back inside and hide under a dryer. "It is not just the shoes," she said, desperation creeping into her tone. My right leg is cramping. I have been sitting in that chair for 2 hours and I got a cramp. I don't think I can press the brake pedal hard enough if I need to stop." I gripped the steering wheel of my truck, my knuckles turning white. She was so close to the truth it was sickening. She was worried about pressing the brake pedal. The irony was thick enough to choke on. "Don't worry about that," I said, my voice dropping a register, becoming slightly firmer. "The brakes on that car are sensitive. You barely have to touch them. You know how well I maintain my vehicles. They are in perfect condition, safe as a tank. Unless, of course, something happened to them recently that I don't know about." I saw her flinch physically as if I had slapped her. She turned her back to the street, hunched over the phone. "Thad. Please," she whined, playing the victim card she had perfected over 2 decades. "Why are you pressuring me?" "I told you I don't feel well. I have a migraine coming on. The smell of the gasoline from that old car makes me sick. Just leave it there. Call a tow truck to take it home." I will pay for it. You will pay for it, I asked. Since when do you pay for anything, Bernice? I pay for the house. I pay for the cars. I pay for Dante's mistakes. I pay for your salon visits. All I am asking is for my wife to do one simple thing: drive my car 3 miles. Why is that so terrifying for you? Because I don't want to, she snapped, her facade cracking. I am not getting in that car. Thaddeus, I am not doing it. You can't make me. I watched her unravel. This woman who had shared my bed, who had whispered false promises of forever, was standing there refusing to get into a vehicle because she had conspired to turn it into my coffin. She wasn't refusing because she was lazy or entitled, though she was both of those things. She was refusing because of self-preservation. She knew that getting behind that wheel meant death, and she was perfectly fine with me doing it, but she wouldn't risk a single manicured fingernail. The rage inside me was a cold, dark thing, but I kept it on a leash. I needed one more push. I needed her to admit it without admitting it. Bernice, listen to me. I said, my voice low and dangerous now. The loving husband mask was slipping just enough for her to see the eyes of the man beneath. The man who had survived war, poverty, and business sharks. You are acting strange. You are acting scared. I am looking at that car right now and it looks fine. The tires are good. The engine is purring. I paused for effect. Unless there is something wrong with it that you are not telling me. Did Dante touch it? I saw her stiffen. Her head snapped up, looking around wildly. Dante. Why would Dante touch your car? She shrieked, her voice hysterical. He hasn't been near your garage. He has been with Tiffany all day. Liar. He came by to borrow some tools earlier, I said, lying smoothly. I thought maybe he tried to help me out and fix something. He is a good boy, right? He wouldn't do anything to put his stepfather in danger, or his mother. Thad, stop it, she cried. I am going home. I am calling a cab. I am not driving that car. I decided it was time. Time to pull the trigger on the trap. I let a long silence stretch between us. I watched her hand shaking the phone pressed so hard against her ear her knuckles were white. Bernice, I said softly. What? She gasped. Why are you trembling? I asked. I am not trembling. Yes, you are, I said. I can hear it in your voice. You sound terrified, and I think I know why. She didn't speak. She just stood there frozen. You aren't worried about your shoes, I said, and you aren't worried about a migraine. I took a deep breath and delivered the line that would end our marriage and start the war. You are afraid because you know that if you press that brake pedal, it is going to go all the way to the floor, aren't you? I saw her freeze. Her entire body went rigid. You are afraid because you know Dante cut the lines. I continued, my voice hard as steel. You are afraid to drive it because you know that car is a death trap meant for me. Isn't that right, Bernice? Are you afraid of driving a car with no brakes? I watched through the windshield as her hand went limp. The phone slipped from her fingers. It tumbled through the air in slow motion, hitting the concrete sidewalk with a crack that I could almost hear from across the street. She didn't move to pick it up. She just stared at the Mustang, then lifted her head and looked around slowly, realizing finally that she wasn't alone. She knew I was watching. She didn't know where, but she felt my eyes on her. She backed away from the car, stumbling in her expensive heels. She turned and ran. She didn't run back into the salon. She didn't run toward the bus stop. She ran blindly down the sidewalk, leaving her purse, her dignity, and her lies on the pavement next to the shattered phone. I watched her go. I didn't chase her. I didn't need to. She was running to tell Dante. She was running to warn the rats that the ship was sinking. I put my truck in gear and pulled out of the parking lot. The first battle was over. I had won. But the war had just begun. I dialed Big Mike again. Mike, I said, go pick up the car. Take it to the impound lot at the precinct. Tell Detective Miller I have some evidence for him. And Mike, yeah, boss. Don't scratch it. I'm going to need it for the funeral. Whose funeral? Mike asked. Theirs, I said. I hung up and drove toward the house. I had to get there before they did. I had a dinner to prepare, and I wanted to make sure the table was set for the last meal this family would ever eat together. They wanted to play games with my life. Fine. But they forgot one thing. I was the one who wrote the rule book on survival. And tonight school was in session. The smell of pot roast filled the house, a thick, savory scent that usually meant comfort and family. Bernice had been cooking for 3 hours, chopping vegetables with a frantic energy that told me she was terrified. She was trying to perform normalcy, trying to summon the ghost of the happy marriage we pretended to have, but every time she looked at me, her eyes darted away like a guilty dog. She hadn't told them yet. She hadn't had a chance to call Dante and warn him that I had towed the death trap to her salon. Or maybe she was too paralyzed by fear to admit that their plan had failed. Either way, the stage was set, and the players were arriving. I sat at the head of the dining room table, the same spot I had occupied for 20 years. I watched the clock on the wall. 6 o'clock sharp. The doorbell rang. It was Dante and his wife Tiffany. As they walked in, the air in the room shifted. It became heavier, charged with a static electricity that made the hair on my arms stand up. Dante looked pale. He was wearing a fresh polo shirt and khakis, trying to look like the respectable son, but sweat was beading on his forehead. He avoided looking at the garage, and he definitely avoided looking at me. Tiffany, on the other hand, walked in like she owned the place. She was a petite woman with blonde hair, perfectly styled, and a smile that never quite reached her cold, calculating eyes. She kissed my cheek, and I had to fight the urge to wipe the spot immediately. "Hi, Dad," she chirped, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness she reserved for when she wanted money. "You look tired. Is everything okay?" "I am fine, Tiffany," I said, keeping my voice level. "Just a long day." We sat down. Bernice brought out the roast, her hands trembling as she set the heavy platter on the table. The china clattered loudly, startling Dante. He jumped in his seat, his knee hitting the table leg. "Jumpy tonight, son?" I asked, unfolding my napkin. "Just stress," Dante muttered, reaching for the water pitcher. "Work is crazy." I watched him pour. His hand wasn't steady. He spilled a little on the tablecloth. A week ago, I would have worried about him. I would have asked if he needed help with his debts. Tonight, I just watched him suffer. We ate in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the scraping of silverware against plates. It was the sound of a family coming apart at the seams. I took a bite of the roast. It was dry. Bernice had overcooked it. She was distracted. Tiffany cleared her throat. I knew that sound. It was the opening bell for the main event. She dabbed her mouth with a napkin and turned her body toward me, putting on a face of deep, exaggerated concern. "Thaddeus," she started. She rarely called me Dad when she was about to stick the knife in. Bernice called me earlier. She was so worried. "She said you had some trouble with the Mustang today, that you got confused about where you were and had to have it towed." I stopped chewing. So that was the angle. Bernice had spun a lie to cover her tracks, or maybe they had concocted this together in the last hour. They weren't going to admit the brakes were cut. They were going to pivot. They were going to use the incident to prove I was incompetent. I stared at Tiffany. "I didn't get confused," I said calmly. "The car had a mechanical issue." Tiffany sighed a long, pitying sound. She reached out and patted my hand. Her skin felt cold. "Thad, be honest with us. We have noticed some changes lately. You are forgetting things. You are mixing up dates. And now you are having trouble maintaining the cars. It is dangerous, Thad. A man your age, well, reflexes slow down. Memory fades. Maybe you thought you fixed the brakes last week, but you actually forgot to tighten a bolt. Or maybe you forgot to check the fluid." I looked at Dante. He was staring at his plate, pushing peas around with his fork. He was letting his wife do the dirty work. "Is that what you think?" "Dante," I asked, "you think I am too old to turn a wrench?" Dante looked up, his eyes shifting nervously. I don't know, Thad. Tiffany has a point. That Mustang is old. You are old. Maybe it is time you stopped messing around in the garage before you hurt yourself. Or someone else. There it was. The gaslighting. They were planting the seeds. If I died in a crash, it wouldn't be murder. It would be a tragic accident caused by a senile old man who shouldn't have been driving. It was brilliant. It was evil. And it was exactly what I expected. I slowly chewed my food, letting the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable. I swallowed, took a sip of water, and then reached into my pocket. I pulled out the keys to the Mustang. The metal jangled loudly as I tossed them onto the center of the table. They landed right next to the gravy boat, gleaming under the chandelier light. Dante flinched as if I had thrown a live grenade. Bernice stopped eating her fork, hovering halfway to her mouth. "You know," I said, leaning back in my chair and crossing my arms. "You might be right. Maybe I am getting old. Maybe I do forget things." I saw a flicker of hope in Tiffany's eyes. She thought I was folding. She thought I was accepting their narrative. But I continued, my voice hardening just a fraction. I spent all afternoon in the garage after the tow truck dropped it off. I checked everything, every bolt, every line. It seems perfect to me now. In fact, it drives better than ever. I looked directly at Dante. His face was a mask of terror. He knew for a fact that the brake lines were severed. He didn't know if I had actually fixed them or if I was just saying that. He was trapped in a box of his own making. Since you are so worried about safety, I said, I want to put your mind at ease. I want to prove to you that the car is safe, and I want to do something nice for the family. I pointed a finger at the keys. Dante, I said, your car has been having transmission trouble, right? You complained about it last week. Dante nodded dumbly. Yeah, it slips gears. Well, I don't want you driving my granddaughter in an unsafe car, I said. So here is the plan. Tomorrow morning, I want you to take the Mustang, drive Olivia to school. It is a solid steel frame, safest car on the road. She loves that car. She is always asking for a ride in Grandpa's race car. The room went dead silent. I watched the blood drain from Dante's face until he looked like a corpse. I had just asked him to put his own daughter, my innocent granddaughter, into the vehicle he had sabotaged. I had raised the stakes from money to blood. Take the keys, son, I urged, pushing them slightly toward him. Take Olivia to school, then drive it to work. Keep it for the week. If it handles well for you, then we will know. I am not senile, right? Dante stared at the keys. His breathing became shallow and rapid. He looked at Bernice, begging for help with his eyes. Bernice looked like she was about to throw up. She couldn't speak. If she warned him, she admitted the conspiracy. If she didn't, her granddaughter might die. Tiffany, sensing the tension but not understanding the mechanical reality, tried to intervene. That is a nice offer, Thad, but Dante doesn't like driving stick shift in traffic. He knows how to drive it. I cut her off. He learned on that car. Didn't you, Dante? Dante's hand was shaking so badly he had to grip the edge of the table. I can't, he stammered. Why not? I pressed. My voice dropped, becoming a low growl. Are you afraid of something you just said? I was losing my mind. If I am senile and I say the car is fixed, you should check it for me. Unless you know something I don't. Thad, please, Bernice whispered, her voice cracking. No, I said sharply. I want an answer. Dante, take the keys. Take your daughter to school in my car. Do it. I saw the moment he broke. The pressure was too much. The image of his daughter in that passenger seat screaming as the car careened off the road collided with his greed. No, Dante shouted. He jumped up from the table so fast his chair flew backward and crashed onto the floor. His arm flailed out, hitting the tureen of hot soup. The ceramic bowl shattered against the hardwood floor, sending steaming broth and vegetables splattering across the room. It splashed onto Tiffany's dress and she screamed, jumping up. I am not driving that damn car, Dante yelled, his face turning a blotchy red. It is a death trap. Why is it a death trap, Dante? I asked, remaining seated perfectly calm amidst the chaos. I told you I fixed it. Why are you so sure it is dangerous? Because you are old. He screamed, grasping for the lie, but it was slipping away. You don't know what you are doing. It is not safe for Olivia. I won't let her near it. He was panting, his chest heaving. The room was a mess of broken china and spilled soup. The facade of the happy family dinner lay in ruins around us. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the cowardice. I saw the entitlement. And I saw the guilt. He wouldn't drive the car because he knew he had cut the lines. He knew because he was the one who signed the death warrant. I stood up slowly. I picked up the keys from the table and slipped them back into my pocket. You are right, Dante, I said quietly. It is not safe, but not because I am old. I walked over to the mess on the floor. I stepped over the broken shards of the soup bowl right up to where he was standing. I was 3 inches shorter than him, but in that moment I towered over him. Get out, I said. What? Tiffany gasped, wiping soup from her designer skirt. Get out of my house, I repeated. Take your wife, take your lies, and don't you ever come back here asking for money again. Thaddeus, you are being unreasonable, Tiffany shrieked. It was an accident. He is just stressed. I looked at Tiffany. The mask was gone. I let her see the Marine. I let her see the man who had survived combat. I know about the brakes, Tiffany, I said. The color vanished from her face. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I know everything I said. Now get out before I call the police and have you dragged out. Dante didn't wait. He grabbed Tiffany's arm and practically dragged her toward the door. They fled like rats scuttling away from the light. I heard the front door slam and then the roar of their engine as they peeled out of the driveway. I turned back to the table. Bernice was still sitting there weeping silently into her hands. The room smelled of pot roast and betrayal. I looked at the mess on the floor. I wasn't going to clean it up. Not tonight. Tonight I had work to do. They knew that I knew. The element of surprise was gone. Now they would be desperate, and desperate people are dangerous. I looked at Bernice. "Stop crying," I said. "It is too late for tears." I walked past her, heading for the bedroom. I needed to pack. I knew they wouldn't stop here. Tiffany was smart and she was cornered. She would strike back and she wouldn't use a pair of wire cutters next time. She would use the law. I had to be ready. I went into the bedroom and pulled my old duffel bag from the closet, the one I used to take on deployments. It seemed fitting. I was going to war again. But this time, the enemy slept down the hall. I closed the door to the master bedroom and turned the lock with a soft click. To anyone listening on the other side, it was the sound of an old, tired man retreating from a family argument, perhaps to sleep off the embarrassment of a spilled dinner. I made a show of shuffling my feet, coughing a little and creaking the bed springs as if I were settling in for the night. But I didn't lie down. I sat on the edge of the mattress in the dark and reached into the bottom of my duffel bag. My hands found the cold, hard plastic of the receiver. It was a piece of equipment I had acquired through a security contractor I worked with at King Industries. People think technology is only for the young, for the generation that lives on social media. They forget that my generation built the foundation of the world they live in. I had slipped the transmitter a small black disc, no larger than a quarter, under the rim of the mahogany coffee table in the living room while I was pretending to help Bernice clean up the broken soup bowl. It was a risky move, practiced in the blink of an eye, a sleight of hand I hadn't used since my days in recon. I put the earpiece in and adjusted the frequency. The static hissed for a second, then cleared. The silence of my bedroom was replaced by the crystal-clear audio of the treachery happening 30 feet away. The first sound I heard was the sharp intake of breath, followed by the dull thud of something hitting a cushion. "Tiffany." "You are a moron, Dante," she hissed. Her voice was unrecognizable. Gone was the sweet, doting daughter-in-law. This was a predator. "You are an absolute incompetence, waste of space. How could you not check if his truck was in the driveway? How could you be so sloppy?" I heard Dante pacing. The sound of his expensive sneakers squeaking on the hardwood floor was erratic. I didn't see him. "Tiffany," he whined. "I swear. He must have parked down the street. He set me up. You saw what he did with the keys." "He knows. He knows I cut them." "Shut up," Tiffany snapped. "Of course he knows. He literally towed the car to your mother's salon to send a message. He is mocking us. He is laughing at us." There was a pause, and then I heard Bernice's voice. It was trembling, but there was an ugliness to it I had never wanted to admit existed. "What are we going to do? He kicked you out, Dante. If he changes the locks, if he calls his lawyer, he won't call the police." Dante said, his voice hopeful but weak. "He would have done it already. He is family. He won't turn his own son in. He is not your father." "Dante," Tiffany screamed, "stop calling him that. He is a bank account. He is a resource. And right now, he is a liability that is becoming impossible to manage." I sat there in the dark, my hands clenched into fists on my knees. Hearing it confirmed, hearing the raw hatred in their voices felt like taking a bullet. It hurts more than shrapnel because you can't stitch up a betrayal. "So what do we do?" Dante asked. "Do I go back and finish it? I can sneak into the bedroom tonight. Pillow over the face. We can say it was his heart." "No," Bernice shouted. "No more violence. Not like that. It is too messy now. He is on high alert. If he dies tonight, the autopsy will be thorough. They will look for bruises. They will look for struggle. We can't risk it." Then what Dante sounded desperate. "I owe the cartel 40 grand by Friday. If I don't pay, they aren't going to sue me, Tiff. They are going to break my legs." I leaned forward, listening intently. The cartel. So that was the urgency. My stepson hadn't just gambled away his allowance. He had gambled away his life, and he was trying to trade mine for his. "We pivot," Tiffany said. Her voice dropped, becoming calm, calculated, and terrifying. "We go to Plan B." "What is Plan B?" Bernice asked. "We don't kill him," Tiffany said. "We neutralize him. We take away his power. We take away his credibility. Think about it. What happened today? He accused me of cutting his brakes," Dante said. "Exactly," Tiffany said. And what does that look like to an outsider? A 72-year-old man who has a history of heart problems, who is suddenly paranoid, accusing his loving family of murder. He towed his own car to a salon because he forgot how to drive it. He threw a tantrum at dinner. He is aggressive. He is delusional. I felt a chill run down my spine. I saw where she was going. It was a strategy more cruel than murder. We use the brakes against him, Tiffany continued. We call the police, not to report a crime, but to report a mental health crisis. We tell them Thaddeus cut his own brake lines. We tell them he is confused, that he thinks we are enemies. We tell them he threatened us with a weapon at dinner. But he didn't have a weapon, Dante said. He threw the keys at you, Tiffany corrected. In the eyes of the law, aggressive behavior from a senile patient is grounds for intervention. We file for an emergency protective order. We get him committed for a 72-hour psychiatric hold. Once he is in the system, once he is labeled dementia or paranoid schizophrenic, anything he says about us is just the rambling of a crazy old man. No one will believe him about the money. No one will believe him about the brakes. And then Bernice asked, and then Tiffany said, I can practically hear her smiling, you petition for conservatorship, Bernice. You become his legal guardian. You gain control over his medical decisions, his living situation, and most importantly, his assets. We can sell the house. We can liquidate his accounts. We can put him in a state facility where he won't be a bother to anyone, and we control the fortune. I stopped breathing. This was the nightmare. To be stripped of my mind, my rights, my freedom. To be locked away in a white room while they spent the money I broke my back to earn. It was a fate worse than death. It was erasure. But the will... Bernice said, her voice dropping to a whisper. He mentioned the lawyer. If he changes the will before we get the guardianship, he can't change the will if he is declared mentally incompetent, Tiffany said. That is why we have to act now. Tonight. Tomorrow morning at the latest. We need to document everything. Every outburst. Every strange behavior. There was a silence, and then Bernice spoke again. The words she said next broke the last thread of affection I held for her. He has a life insurance policy, she said softly. $2 million. It pays out double for accidental death. But if he dies of natural causes, or if he lingers in a home for 10 years, the premiums are expensive. We don't need him to die yet, Ma Dante said. We just need access to the cash flow. But if he happens to have a heart attack from the stress of being committed, well, that is just God's will, right? God's will. They invoked God while plotting to destroy a man's soul. I need that money, Bernice said, her voice gaining strength. I have waited 20 years, Tiffany. 20 years of listening to his war stories. 20 years of living in this house with his cheap furniture and his obsession with that dirty garage. I deserve that $2 million. It is my retirement. I pulled the earpiece out. I couldn't listen to any more. I felt sick to my stomach, a physical nausea that roiled in my gut. I had given Bernice everything she asked for. I had been faithful. I had been kind. And all this time she looked at me and saw a waiting room. She saw a paycheck that was taking too long to clear. I sat in the darkness, the silence of the room pressing in on me. They thought they had me. They thought they could use the system against me. They thought that because I was a black man in his 70s, the world would look at me and see senility, not strength. They were counting on my invisibility, but they had made a critical error. They assumed I was reacting out of fear. They didn't know I was already mobilizing. They were planning a legal ambush for tomorrow morning. They wanted to paint a picture of a crazy old man. Fine, I would give them a picture, but I would also give them the negative. I stood up and moved to my desk. I didn't turn on the light. I worked by the moonlight filtering through the blinds. I packed my laptop. I packed the external hard drive where I kept the backups of the security footage. The footage I had told Dante didn't exist, but which I had actually pulled from the cloud server the moment I walked in the door. The camera in the garage wasn't broken. It was hidden, and it had captured everything. I picked up the small framed photo on my dresser. It was a picture of me and my platoon in Vietnam, 1968. We were young, muddy, and terrified, but we were alive because we watched each other's backs. I looked at the young Thaddeus in the photo. He had survived the jungle. He had survived the Tet Offensive. He wasn't going to be taken down by a greedy hairdresser and a gambling addict. I slipped the photo into my bag. Tiffany wanted a show. She wanted to involve the police and the courts. She wanted to play the concerned family card. I zipped up the bag. The sound was loud in the quiet room like a zipper on a body bag. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. The night was calm. The world was asleep. But inside this house, the enemy was sharpening their knives. "Let them come," I whispered to the glass. "Let them bring the police. Let them bring the doctors. Let them try to take my mind." I checked my watch. It was 2:00 a.m. I had 4 hours before their Plan B went into action. 4 hours to turn their trap into a grave. I picked up the dog's leash. Buster, my old Rottweiler, thumped his tail from his bed in the corner. He was the only loyal soul in this house. "Come on, boy," I whispered. "We are going for a ride." I wasn't going to wait for them to knock on my door. I was going to vanish. And when I reappeared, I wouldn't be Thaddeus the husband. I would be Mr. King. And Mr. King didn't take prisoners. The coffee in my mug was still hot when the blue and red lights washed over my living room walls like a disco strobe in a nightmare. It was 7 in the morning. I had been up since 4, sitting in my armchair by the window, dressed in my best Sunday suit, waiting. I knew they were coming. I just didn't expect them to bring an army. I counted 3 squad cars and an unmarked sedan that smelled of bureaucracy. 2 uniformed officers walked up the path, their hands resting casually but intentionally near their belts. Behind them trailed a woman with a tight bun and a clipboard, the universal symbol for someone who is here to ruin your life for your own good. And behind them, huddled together like survivors of a shipwreck, were Tiffany and Bernice. I didn't wait for them to kick the door down. I opened it while his hand was still raised to knock. "Mr. Thaddeus King," the lead officer asked. He was young, white, with a buzz cut and eyes that were already assessing me as a threat. He didn't see a business owner. He didn't see a veteran. He saw a large 72-year-old black man standing in a doorway, and in this neighborhood, that was enough to make him nervous. "I am Mr. King," I said, my voice steady. "Can I help you, officers?" "We received a 911 call regarding a domestic disturbance and a potential mental health crisis," the officer said. "We need you to step out onto the porch, sir. Keep your hands where I can see them." I stepped out. The morning air was crisp. I saw neighbors peeking through their blinds. Mrs. Higgins across the street was watching from her porch. This was part of the plan. Public humiliation. Then the performance began. Tiffany pushed past the officers, her face a mask of absolute terror. Her mascara was smeared artfully under her eyes, and she was shaking so violently her jewelry rattled. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "That is him!" she screamed, her voice cracking perfectly. "That is him! Oh my God, please don't let him hurt Dante again, ma'am. Please step back," the officer said, but his tone was gentle. He looked at her and saw a petite, terrified woman in distress. He looked at me and saw the monster she was describing. "He has a weapon," Tiffany sobbed, burying her face in Bernice's shoulder. "Last night, he had pliers, huge metal shears. He was swinging them around the kitchen. He said he was going to cut us all, like he cut the brake lines. He was talking about blood. He is crazy. He is going to kill us. It was a masterclass in manipulation. She had taken the truth, the pliers Dante used, the cut brake lines, and inverted it. She was using her tears, her gender, and the racial dynamics of the situation to paint a picture that the police were conditioned to believe. She was the damsel. I was the brute." Bernice chimed in, playing the role of the heartbroken wife. She looked at the social worker, her eyes pleading. "I am so sorry," she whispered, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "He hasn't been himself for months. The dementia, it is getting worse. He forgets who we are. He thinks we are enemies. Yesterday he towed his own car because he forgot how to drive. Now he is violent. I am scared to sleep in my own house." The social worker scribbled furiously on her clipboard. She looked at me with that professional detachment that chills the blood. "Mr. King," she said, stepping forward, "my name is Sarah Jenkins from Adult Protective Services. Based on the statements from your family and the police report filed this morning, we have reason to believe you are in immediate danger to yourself and others. We are placing you under an emergency 72-hour psychiatric hold." I stood there stone-faced. Inside, my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but I didn't let a muscle twitch. I knew the rules of this game. If I raised my voice, I was aggressive. If I stepped forward, I was assaulting an officer. If I denied it too passionately, I was paranoid. "I am perfectly sane, ma'am," I said, keeping my hands visible and open, "and I have never threatened anyone in my life." "He is lying," Tiffany shrieked. She looked at the young officer, her eyes wide and pleading. "He threatened to kill my husband. He said, he fixed the car to kill us. Look at his eyes. He is not there. He is gone." The young officer stepped closer. Invading my personal space, he was trying to provoke a reaction. "Sir, turn around and place your hands behind your back. We are not asking." I looked at him. I saw the adrenaline in his eyes. He was ready to take me down. I looked at Tiffany. She had stopped crying for a split second, a tiny smirk playing on her lips behind her hands. She thought she had won. She thought she was about to watch me be dragged away in cuffs, stripped of my dignity, and locked in a padded room while they looted my accounts. It was the most dangerous moment of my life. More dangerous than the jungles of Vietnam. Because in the jungle, the enemy wore a uniform. Here, the enemy was wearing my last name. I took a deep breath. I didn't turn around. "Officer," I said, my voice low and authoritative, the voice of a man who used to command battalions. "Before you put those cuffs on me, there is something you need to know." "Turn around, sir," the officer barked, his hand gripping my arm. I didn't resist the grip, but I didn't turn. I held his gaze. "The young lady says I threatened them in the garage with pliers, correct?" I asked. "That is the statement," the officer said, unhooking his handcuffs. "And she says I was swinging a weapon around the kitchen last night." "Yes. Now turn around." "And my wife says I am suffering from dementia and forgot how to drive my car." The social worker nodded. "It is consistent with the report, Mr. King. Please don't make this difficult." "I am not making it difficult," I said. "I am making it accurate. Because if you arrest me based on these lies, you are going to lose your badge, son." The officer paused. The sheer confidence in my voice made him hesitate. "What did you say to me?" I said. I pointed a finger slowly toward the detached garage that if I was waving pliers around and threatening to kill people, it would be on video. Tiffany stopped crying instantly. The silence that fell over the porch was absolute. "What video?" Bernice asked, her voice trembling. I looked at my wife. I looked at the woman who had slept beside me for 20 years while plotting my demise. "The security system, Bernice," I said. "You know the one I installed yesterday morning after I found my brake lines cut? The one that covers the entire driveway, the garage interior, and the living room." I turned my eyes back to the officer. "Officer, if you walk into my living room right now, my laptop is open on the coffee table. The footage from the last 24 hours is queued up. You won't see me waving pliers, but you will see my stepson Dante crawling out from under my car holding wire cutters. You will hear him on speakerphone telling his mother that he just signed my death warrant. And you will see this young lady who is currently crying crocodile tears telling her husband last night that they needed to frame me for dementia because murder was too messy." I saw the color drain from Tiffany's face. It didn't just fade, it vanished. She looked like a wax figure melting in the sun. She took a step back, bumping into the porch railing. He is lying," she stammered, but the conviction was gone. The white woman tears had dried up instantly, replaced by the cold, hard look of a criminal caught in the headlights. "There is no camera. He is bluffing. He is crazy." "Am I asked. "Officer, I give you permission to enter my home and check the laptop. Or we can stand here and wait for my lawyer, Mr. Vance, who is currently en route with a court order to preserve that evidence." The older officer who had been standing back finally spoke up. He stepped forward, his eyes narrowing at Tiffany. "Ma'am, did you say he threatened you with pliers in the garage?" "Yes," Tiffany insisted, but her voice was shrill now. "And you saw this happen?" "Yes, then why does Mr. King claim there is footage of your husband under the car?" the older officer asked. "Because he is delusional," Tiffany screamed. The officer looked at me, then he looked at the laptop visible through the front window. "Stay here," he told his partner. "Keep an eye on everyone." He walked into the house. The 3 minutes he was inside were the longest of my life. I stood on the porch staring at Tiffany. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She was picking at her fingernails, her breathing shallow. Bernice was clutching her chest, looking like she might actually have the heart attack she wished on me. The social worker looked unsure. She lowered her clipboard. "Mr. King, if there is evidence." "Just wait," I said. The older officer walked back out. His face was grim. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at Tiffany. He walked straight up to his partner and whispered something in his ear. The young officer's eyes went wide. He looked at Tiffany, then back at me, his expression changing from aggression to shock. He turned to Tiffany. "Ma'am, you need to step down off the porch." "What?" Tiffany asked. "Why, take him. "He is the crazy one, ma'am. Step down off the porch," the officer repeated, his hand moving back to his handcuffs. But this time, he wasn't looking at me. "We watched the video," the older officer said, his voice hard. "The audio is very clear, especially the part where you discuss filing a false police report to obtain a conservatorship." Tiffany gasped. She tried to run. It was a pathetic attempt, just a stumble toward the driveway, but the young officer was faster. He grabbed her arm. "Get off me!" she screamed. "You can't touch me. I am the victim. You are under arrest for filing a false police report and conspiracy," the officer said, spinning her around. The click of the handcuffs was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. Bernice let out a wail and slumped against the wall. "Dante. Where is Dante?" she cried. "We will be picking him up shortly," the officer said. I watched them drag Tiffany toward the squad car. She was screaming, cursing, blaming Dante, blaming me, blaming the world. The social worker looked at me and closed her folder. "I apologize, Mr. King," she said quietly. "We have to take all reports seriously, but it seems we were misinformed." I nodded. "Just doing your job, ma'am." The older officer walked up to me. He didn't apologize, but he nodded. A respectful nod. "We will need a copy of that drive, Mr. King." "You will have it," I said. "My lawyer will bring it to the station." They loaded Tiffany into the back of the car. She pressed her face against the glass, her eyes filled with hate. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just stood there, the master of my own house, watching the trash get taken out. But I knew this wasn't over. Bernice was still standing on the porch, sobbing. Dante was still out there. And the cartel was still waiting for their money. I had won the battle of the front porch, but the war for my survival was moving to a new phase. I turned to Bernice. She looked up at me, mascara running down her cheeks. "Thad, please," she whimpered. "I didn't know. They made me—" "Save it," I said, turning my back on her. "You can tell it to the judge. Right now you have 10 minutes to pack a bag and get out of my house before I have you removed for trespassing." I walked back inside and poured myself a fresh cup of coffee. My hands were finally steady. The ambush had failed. Now it was time for the counterattack. The 3 minutes the officers spent inside my house felt like 3 decades. I stood on my front porch, the morning sun hitting my face, but I felt cold down to my bones. I could hear the murmur of their voices inside the heavy thud of their boots on my hardwood floors, and the sharp, high-pitched interjections of Tiffany explaining where the equipment was. I kept my face impassive, a mask of stone I had perfected in the trenches of Quezon, but inside my stomach was twisting into knots. I had played a dangerous card. I had told them to check the cameras to prove my innocence, but I knew something they didn't. The camera in the kitchen, the one that would have proven I never waved pliers at anyone, the one that would have proven Tiffany was a liar, had been dead for 6 months. A power surge had fried the motherboard, and I had been too busy running my company to fix it. I had the garage footage of Dante safely tucked away on a backup drive in my duffel bag, but the house system. It was a brick. I had bluffed. I had banked on Tiffany's guilt making her fold before the police actually checked. I had miscalculated. Tiffany was a better liar than I gave her credit for. The screen door creaked open. The older officer stepped out first. He didn't look happy. He adjusted his belt, his eyes hard and unreadable behind his sunglasses. He looked at me, then at the social worker, and finally at Tiffany, who was chewing her lips so hard I thought it might bleed. "Mr. King," the officer said, his voice flat, "we checked the server room as you instructed," and I asked, keeping my chin up. "The system is down," he said. "The hard drive is corrupted. There is no footage from the last 24 hours. No footage of the kitchen, no footage of the garage. Nothing." My heart hammered against my ribs. Tiffany let out a gasp that sounded like relief, but she quickly turned it into a sob. "See?" she cried out, pointing a shaking finger at me. "I told you. He destroyed it. He wiped the tapes." "Why would he wipe the tapes if he was innocent? He is trying to hide what he did. He knows he attacked me." The narrative shifted instantly. The bluff had backfired. Instead of proving my innocence, the lack of evidence now looked like a cover-up. The social worker scribbled furiously on her pad, nodding as if everything was falling into place. Paranoia. Destruction of property. Violent outbursts. I fit the profile they had already built in their heads. The young officer stepped toward me again, reaching for his handcuffs. "That is enough," he said. "Tampering with evidence. Domestic assault. We are taking you in for the 72-hour hold, Mr. King. It is for your own safety." "Wait," I said, my voice deepening. "You are not taking me anywhere." "Sir, Put your hands behind your back. The officer barked his patience gone. I need to make a phone call, I said. I have a right to legal counsel. You can call from the station, he said, grabbing my wrist. His grip was tight, aggressive. I didn't resist, but I didn't move. I planted my feet. I was 72, but I was 220 pounds of Marine Corps muscle and steel mill grit. He pulled, but I didn't budge. I am calling my lawyer now, I said, staring him down. Or you can explain to your captain why you arrested a decorated veteran and business owner without due process based on the word of a woman who just lied to your face. The older officer put a hand on his partner's chest. Let him make the call, Rook. The young officer let go of my arm with a sneer. Make it quick. I pulled my phone from my pocket with slow, deliberate movements. I dialed the number I had set to speed dial 1. Vance picked up on the first ring. I knew he would. He was already in the neighborhood. I had texted him the code word Eagle the moment the police lights flashed in the window. They are here, Vance, I said into the phone. They are trying to cuff me. The camera bluff failed. They want to commit me. I am turning the corner, Vance said. His voice was calm, the voice of a man who eats prosecutors for breakfast. Stall them for 30 seconds. I hung up and looked at the officers. My lawyer is here. As if on cue, a sleek black Mercedes sedan screeched around the corner, hopping the curb and coming to a halt right on my lawn. The door flew open before the engine even stopped. Out stepped Jeremiah Vance. He was my age, a white man with a shock of silver hair and a suit that cost more than the squad car parked in my driveway. He moved with the energy of a man half his age. He didn't walk. He marched. He carried a leather briefcase in one hand and a terrifying amount of authority in the other. "Who is in charge here?" Vance bellowed, storming up the walkway. "I am the older officer," said, stepping forward. "And you are parking in a crime scene, sir." "I am parking on my client's private property," Vance shot back, not breaking stride. "I am Jeremiah Vance, attorney at law, and if you put one metal ring on Mr. King's wrist, I will have your badge, your pension, and your precinct sued into the Stone Age by lunchtime." Tiffany looked at Vance, confusion clouding her face. She didn't know who he was. To her, I was just a retired mechanic. She didn't know I had a lawyer on retainer who charged $1,000 an hour. "This man is a danger to himself," the social worker piped up, trying to assert her authority. "He is suffering from advanced dementia. He is violent. We have a court order pending for—" "You have nothing," Vance interrupted her, slamming his briefcase onto the porch railing. He popped the latches with a loud snap. "You claim my client has dementia. You claim he is mentally incompetent." Vance pulled out a thick file folder and waved it in the air. "This is a comprehensive neurological and cognitive evaluation performed 48 hours ago by Dr. Aris Thorne, the leading neurologist at Chicago Methodist." He shoved the papers into the social worker's hands. "Read it," Vance commanded. Mr. King scored 30 out of 30 on the cognitive assessment. Perfect recall, perfect spatial awareness, no signs of Alzheimer's, no signs of dementia. In fact, the doctor noted that his cognitive function is superior to most men 20 years his junior. The social worker, stunned, looked down at the paperwork. Her eyes scanned the pages, and I saw her confidence crumble. The stamp was official. The signature was genuine. The date was undeniable. "But," she stammered. "The family said—" "His wife said he has been forgetting things for months. His wife is a liar," Vance said, turning his cold blue eyes on Bernice. Bernice shrank back against the wall, avoiding his gaze. And as for the violence, Vance continued, turning to the police officers. "You are basing an arrest on the testimony of a woman who, according to my client, is currently attempting to defraud him of his estate. He attacked me," Tiffany shouted, but her voice was shrill and desperate now. "He had pliers." "Did you find pliers on him?" Vance asked the officer. "No," the officer admitted. "Did you find any marks on her?" "No. So you have the word of an estranged daughter-in-law against a man who runs a multi-million-dollar industrial empire." "Wait, what?" the young officer asked. "He runs what?" Vance smiled, a shark-like grin. "Oh, you didn't know Mr. King isn't just a mechanic. He owns King Industries. He supplies the steel for half the skyscrapers going up in this city. Do you really think a man who negotiated a $10 million contract yesterday is wandering around his kitchen waving tools like a lunatic?" The silence that followed was heavy. The young officer looked at me with new eyes. He didn't see a crazy old man anymore. He saw power. He saw influence. And he saw a lawsuit he couldn't win. The older officer took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. He looked at the paperwork in the social worker's hands. He looked at Tiffany, who was now trembling not from fake fear but from real terror. He tipped his hat to Vance. It seems we have a conflicting narrative here, counselor. Indeed we do, Vance said. And until you have a warrant or actual evidence of a crime, I suggest you remove yourself from my client's property. If Mrs. King or her daughter-in-law feel unsafe, they are free to leave. In fact, Mr. King insists on it. The officer nodded. He turned to his partner. Let's go. But he threatened me. Tiffany shrieked. You can't just leave. He is going to kill us, ma'am, the officer said, his voice cold and final. It is a civil matter. If you want to file charges, come down to the station with proof. Otherwise, have a nice day. The police walked back to their cars. The social worker handed the medical file back to Vance, looking apologetic and embarrassed. She scurried away without another word. I stood there watching the lights fade as the cars pulled away. My heart was slowing down, but the adrenaline was still pumping. Vance put a hand on my shoulder. Close one, Thad, he murmured. Too close, I replied quietly. Tiffany and Bernice were left standing on the lawn. They looked like statues of defeat. Their master plan, their quick legal strike, had been shattered by a piece of paper and a lawyer in a bespoke suit. Tiffany turned to look at me. Her eyes were black holes of hatred. She didn't look scared anymore. She looked murderous. She walked past me up the stairs, dragging Bernice with her. As she passed me, she didn't scream. She didn't shout. She leaned in close, so close I could smell her expensive perfume masking the scent of her fear. You got lucky, old man, she whispered. Her voice was a hiss, barely audible over the wind. But lawyers can't stop a heart attack. I stared at her, not blinking. Bernice looked at me, her eyes pleading for forgiveness, but she let Tiffany pull her into the house. I heard them in the hallway. I heard the door to the kitchen close, and then through the thin wood of the door, I heard Tiffany's voice. It wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a command. The legal way is dead, she said. We do it the hard way. The medicine. Tonight. Double the dose. I stood on the porch, Vance beside me. He hadn't heard the whisper. He was busy putting his papers back in his briefcase, looking satisfied with his victory. We got them, Thad Vance said. They are scared. They will back off now. No, Jeremiah, I said, looking at the closed door of my own house. They won't back off. They just changed weapons. I knew what was coming. They were done with courts. They were done with police. They were going back to the original plan. They were going to stop my heart. And this time they wouldn't use a car crash. They would use the pills I took every night to stay alive. I turned to Vance. I need you to do one more thing for me. Anything, Thad. I need you to take that medical report and file it with the registrar. And then I need you to go to my office and open the safe. Get the new will, the one we drafted last month. You want to execute it? Vance asked. Not yet, I said. I want you to hold it. Because tonight, I am going to die. And tomorrow I need to be resurrected. Vance looked at me confused. Thad, what are you talking about? I looked at him, a grim smile touching my lips. Just trust me, old friend. Go, and don't answer your phone tonight unless it is the coroner. Vance hesitated, then nodded. He got into his Mercedes and drove off. I was alone again. I turned and walked back into the house. I was walking into a trap, I knew that. But a trap is only dangerous if you don't know it is there. I knew. And I was hungry. I hoped Bernice was making soup again. I had a feeling the seasoning was going to be interesting tonight. The house was quiet, a suffocating silence that felt heavy enough to crush a man. It was 10 o'clock at night. The police had been gone for 12 hours. The lawyer had left. The neighbors had pulled their curtains shut, tired of the drama on the front lawn. But inside, the war was just entering its deadliest phase. I sat in my armchair in the bedroom, the door locked, staring at the television with the volume turned down low. I wasn't watching the news. I was watching the reflection in the dark window panes. A soft knock came at the door. Thad. It was Bernice. Her voice was soft, trembling slightly. The voice of a woman who wanted to make amends. Or so she wanted me to believe. Thad, honey, I brought you something. I didn't answer immediately. I checked the small pistol I had taped under the armrest of the chair. I didn't think she would come in shooting, but I had learned a long time ago that you never underestimate a cornered enemy. I unlocked the door and opened it. Bernice stood there in her silk robe, holding a steaming mug on a small tray. The smell of warm milk and honey wafted into the room. It was a scent from our past, a comfort she used to offer me when the old shrapnel wounds in my leg kept me up at night. I made you some warm milk, she said, offering a weak, tentative smile. With a little nutmeg and cinnamon, just like you like it. I thought it might help you sleep. We have had such a terrible day, Thad. I just want you to rest. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were red and puffy. If I didn't know better, if I hadn't heard the conversation through the wall earlier, I might have felt sorry for her. I might have taken the mug, drank it down, and thanked God for a wife who cared. But I had heard. The medicine. Tonight. Double the dose. I looked at the mug. The steam rose in lazy spirals. Thank you, Bernice, I said, taking the tray. My voice was raspy. I played the part. I let my shoulders slump. I let my hand shake a little as I took the cup. I am sorry about today, she whispered, touching my arm. I was just scared, Thad. You know how I get. I know, I said. Go to bed, Bernice. I will drink this and turn in. She lingered for a second, her eyes fixated on the cup in my hand. She needed to see me drink it. She needed the confirmation. Go on, I said, ushering her out. I need some quiet. I closed the door and locked it again. The smile vanished from my face instantly. I walked over to the desk lamp and held the mug under the bright bulb. Bernice was a good cook, but she was a terrible chemist. I swirled the milk gently. There at the bottom, and clinging to the sides of the ceramic, were tiny, undissolved granules. They were white, slightly larger than the nutmeg specks. She had crushed the pills, but she hadn't ground them to a fine enough powder. In warm milk they had clumped. Double the dose. I set the mug down on the desk. My hands were steady, but my heart felt like it was cracking open. This was it. The final line. Cutting brake lines was an act of violence, but poisoning a man's comfort food using his own memories against him was an act of pure malice. She didn't just want me dead, she wanted me to drift off to sleep, trusting her and never wake up. I pulled a small empty plastic vial from my medical kit, the kind I used for my glucose strips. I poured a small amount of the milk into the vial, careful to get the sediment at the bottom. I capped it tight and wrapped it in a tissue. This wasn't just milk anymore. It was evidence of attempted murder. I poured the rest of the milk into the soil of the large potted fern in the corner. I watched the white liquid seep into the dark dirt. Goodbye, Bernice, I whispered. I couldn't stay here. If I fell asleep, who knew what they would do? They might pick the lock. They might use a pillow. They might set a fire. The house wasn't a home anymore. It was a kill box. I moved quickly. I didn't turn on the overhead lights. I worked by the glow of the street lamps filtering through the blinds. I grabbed my duffel bag. It was already packed with my clothes and the backup hard drive. I added the vial of poisoned milk. Then I went to the corner of the room where Buster, my old Rottweiler, was sleeping on his rug. Buster, I whispered. He opened one eye, thumping his tail. He was 10 years old with gray fur around his muzzle, but he was still strong. He sensed the tension. He stood up immediately, shaking off sleep, and looked at me with alert brown eyes. He was the only living thing in this house that wouldn't sell me out for a payout. "We are leaving, boy," I said. I couldn't use the door. The floorboards in the hallway creaked, and Bernice was likely listening from her room, waiting for the thud of my body hitting the floor. I went to the window. We were on the first floor, thank God. I slid the sash up. It moved silently on the tracks I had greased myself last month. I popped the screen out. The night air hit me cold and sharp. It smelled of rain and exhaust. It smelled like freedom. I climbed out first, my boots hitting the soft mulch of the flower bed. My knees protested I wasn't 20 anymore, but the pain was grounding. I reached back in and signaled Buster. He hopped through the window with a grace that defied his age. I lowered the sash from the outside, leaving it just an inch open so it wouldn't look suspicious. Then, sticking to the shadows, moving through the hedges like I was back on patrol in the jungle, I made my way to the back alley. My truck was parked 2 blocks away. I had moved it there after the police left, telling Bernice I wanted to clear the driveway. She had thought I was being submissive. I was just clearing my escape route. I lifted Buster into the passenger seat. He settled in, resting his chin on the dashboard. I climbed into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine roared to life. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't look back at the life I was leaving behind. I put it in gear and drove. I wasn't going to a hotel. Hotels leave paper trails. Hotels have clerks who watch the news. I was going to the one place where Thaddeus King the mechanic didn't exist, and Mr. King the tycoon reigned supreme. I drove toward the industrial district, the part of the city that tourists avoided. The streets here were lined with chain-link fences and concrete walls. I pulled up to a massive, nondescript warehouse on 4th Street. The sign on the rusted gate said, "King Storage, Private Property, Keep Out." I punched the code into the keypad. The heavy iron gate rolled back. I drove inside and parked next to a row of shapes covered in canvas tarps. This was my sanctuary. This was my base. I hit the lights. The overhead halogens flickered and hummed to life, illuminating a space that looked less like a garage and more like a museum. Under those tarps were my babies, a 1967 Shelby GT500, a pristine Jaguar E-Type, and in the corner, a massive floor-to-ceiling safe that held the operating cash for my businesses and the deeds to half the block. I set up a cot in the office overlooking the warehouse floor. It was Spartan clean and secure. The walls were brick. The door was steel. I had monitors showing every angle of the exterior. I poured Buster a bowl of water and sat down on the cot. I was safe, but I knew the silence wouldn't last. 2 hours later, my police scanner crackled to life. I kept one on the desk to monitor traffic around the industrial park. All units, the dispatcher's voice cut through the static. Break for a silver alert. I leaned forward. Be on the lookout for a missing senior citizen. Male, black, 72 years of age. Name is Thaddeus King. Last seen at his residence on Maple Avenue. Subject suffers from advanced dementia and may be disoriented. He is believed to be on foot and may be a danger to himself. Family reports he has been without medication for 12 hours. I laughed a dry, humorless sound. Bernice moved fast. She must have checked the room, found it empty, and realized the milk was gone. She didn't call the police to say I escaped. She called to say I wandered off. It was a brilliant, evil move. A silver alert meant every cop in the city was looking for me. It meant that if I was found, I wouldn't be asked questions. I would be detained for my own safety. It meant that any attempt I made to access my bank accounts or talk to a lawyer would be viewed through the lens of a confused old man who needed to be returned to his guardians. She was using the state's compassion as a weapon to hunt me down. I looked at the monitor. The streets outside were empty, but I knew they were coming. They would check the hospitals. They would check the parks. Eventually, they might check the properties listed under my name, although the warehouse was held by a shell company. I picked up the phone, a burner I kept in the safe. I dialed Vance. "You awake?" I asked. "I am now." Vance groaned. "Turn on the news," I said. "I am a fugitive. I hear it." Vance said, the rustle of sheets in the background. "A silver alert." "Really?" "She is doubling down on the dementia narrative." "She tried to poison me, Vance," I said. "I have the milk. I have the sample." "Good God," Vance breathed. "Where are you?" "At the warehouse," I said. "The base." "Stay there," Vance commanded. "Don't go out. If a patrol car spots you, they will drag you to the psych ward before I can file an injunction. They think they are saving a lost grandpa." "I am not lost," I said, looking at the wall of monitors at the empire I had built from scratch. "I am exactly where I need to be." Bernice had activated the nuclear option. She wanted the world to see me as a helpless, lost soul. Fine. I would stay lost for a little while. I would let her play the grieving, worried wife on TV. I would let her dig the hole a little deeper. But while she was performing for the cameras, I would be here in the dark, sharpening the shovel. "Get some sleep, Vance," I said. "Tomorrow we go hunting." I hung up. I reached down and patted Buster's head. "They think I am a lost sheep," I told the dog. "They are about to find out I am the wolf." I lay back on the cot, the pistol within arm's reach. The warehouse was cold, but my rage kept me warm. The silver alert was flashing on the digital billboards across the city, my face plastered above the highway labeled incompetent. Let them look. Let them search. The Thaddeus King they knew was gone. The man who woke up tomorrow would be someone they had never met before. And God help them when he introduced himself. The warehouse was a fortress of solitude in the middle of a sleeping city. Outside, the silver alert was still flashing on highway billboards, painting me as a confused, wandering invalid. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and the hum of high-powered servers. My lawyer, Jeremiah Vance, sat across from me at a makeshift desk made of 2 oil drums and a sheet of plywood. The blue light from his laptop screen illuminated his face, making him look older, grimmer. We weren't 2 old friends catching up. We were 2 generals in a bunker mapping out the enemy's supply lines before the morning airstrike. I poured us both another cup of coffee. It was pitch black, strong enough to strip paint just the way we drank it in the service. Vance didn't look up. His fingers were flying across the keyboard, accessing databases that required passwords most people didn't even know existed. He was following the money, and where the money went, the truth always followed. "Thad, you need to see this," Vance said. His voice was quiet, lacking its usual courtroom bravado. It was the tone he used when the jury came back with a verdict he didn't like. I walked around the table and leaned over his shoulder. On the screen was a digital copy of a document. It looked familiar. It was the deed to my house on Maple Avenue, the house I had bought with cash 20 years ago, so Bernice and I would never have to worry about a mortgage. "Look at the date," Vance pointed a manicured finger at the bottom of the page. 3 months ago, I read. "And look at the signature," he said. I stared at the scrawl on the line next to grantor, Thaddeus King. It looked like my signature. The loop on the K was right. The sharp slant of the T was perfect. If I didn't know for a fact that I hadn't signed it, I might have believed it myself. "She practiced," I whispered. The realization hit me harder than a physical blow. Bernice didn't just forge it in a moment of desperation. She had sat at our kitchen table, probably while I was asleep next to her, and practiced writing my name over and over again until she got it right. She stole my identity before she tried to steal my life. She took out a home equity line of credit, Vance explained, scrolling down to the numbers. $500,000, Thad. The maximum the bank would allow without a face-to-face appraisal. She forged your signature, notarized it with a stamp she likely bought online or stole from a crooked friend, and wired the money out the same day. $500,000, I muttered. I looked at the concrete floor, trying to process the magnitude of the theft. That house was supposed to be our sanctuary. She turned it into an ATM. Where did it go, Jeremiah? Did she buy jewelry? A condo in Florida? Vance shook his head. No, she didn't spend a dime of it on herself. She was acting as a conduit. Look at the transfer logs. He clicked a key and a new window popped up. It was a spider web of transactions, but they all flowed into one central drain. It went to 3 different shell companies, Vance said. But I ran a background check on the registered agents. They are all fronts for a holding company called Redline Auto. Redline, I repeated. The name sounded familiar. It wasn't a dealership, it was a chop shop. A notorious underground operation that the police had been trying to bust for years. They didn't just sell cars. They stripped high-end luxury vehicles stolen from the suburbs and shipped the parts overseas. Your stepson didn't just lose money at the poker table, Thad Vance said, taking off his glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose. Dante is into these guys for $500,000. And knowing the people who run Redline, that isn't a debt you pay with a payment plan. That is a debt you pay with your life. I walked away from the computer and paced the length of the warehouse. I looked at my own collection of cars under the tarps. I treated machines with respect. I restored them. Dante was involved with people who butchered them. It makes sense, I said, my voice echoing in the large space. That is why he was so desperate for the inheritance. He wasn't trying to maintain a lifestyle. He was trying to stop a bullet. It gets worse, Vance said. You might want to sit down for this part. I remained standing. I don't need a chair, Jeremiah. Give it to me. Vance pulled up a series of emails he had intercepted from Dante's cloud account, the same account I had cracked earlier. Dante didn't just promise them the cash, Vance said. He promised them facilities. I froze. Facilities. Read the email, Vance said. I leaned in. The email was from Dante to an address simply labeled The Mechanic. It read, "Be patient. The old man is on his last legs. Once he is out of the picture, I get the keys to King Industries. The warehouse on 4th Street is perfect. Soundproof. Private. We can process 50 cars a week there. No one looks twice at a steel fabrication plant." The rage that surged through me was white hot. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the legacy. I had built King Industries from a single toolbox. I had hired men from the neighborhood who had prison records and gave them a second chance. I had built a place of honest labor. And Dante, he wanted to turn my cathedral of industry into a slaughterhouse for stolen property. He wanted to use my name, my reputation, to launder dirty money for a gang. He wasn't going to sell the business. I realized my hands clenching into fists so tight my knuckles popped. He was going to rot it from the inside out. He was going to destroy everything I built. He is a dead man, I whispered. Not a threat, a fact. If the law doesn't get him, these Redline guys will when he fails to deliver. But here is the final twist, Vance said, and there was a note of admiration in his voice. A dark, twisted admiration. We always thought Tiffany was just the greedy wife, right? The Lady Macbeth, whispering in his ear. She is the one pushing for the conservatorship, I said. She is the brains. She is the brains. All right, Vance agreed. But she isn't on Dante's team. He switched screens one last time. This was a bank statement from an account in the Cayman Islands. While Bernice was forging your signature to save her son and Dante was selling your business to the mob to save his skin, Tiffany was executing her own exit strategy, Vance explained. He pointed to a series of withdrawals from the joint checking account she shared with Dante. They were small enough to avoid federal flagging but frequent. 9,000 here, 8,000 there. Over the last year, she had siphoned off nearly $100,000. But she didn't use it to pay Dante's debts, Vance said. She moved it here, an account solely in her name. And look at this. He pulled up a flight confirmation. One way. Chicago to Paris. Leaving this Friday. She is leaving him, I said, putting the pieces together. She knows Dante is drowning, Vance said. She knows the mob is coming. She pushed for the conservatorship and the quick payout not to save Dante, but to grab one last chunk of your estate before she disappears. She was going to let Dante take the fall. She was going to let Bernice go down for the forgery. And she was going to be sipping wine in France while your family burned to the ground. I stood in the center of the warehouse surrounded by the silent ghosts of my machines. The scope of the betrayal was breathtaking. It wasn't a conspiracy, it was a shark tank. They were all eating each other, and I was just the bait they were fighting over. Bernice was a criminal out of twisted maternal love. Dante was a criminal out of stupidity and fear. But Tiffany was a criminal out of pure, cold-blooded calculation. She was the most dangerous one of them all. I looked at the monitor at the flight itinerary. Friday. 2 days from now. She thinks she is leaving, I said softly. Vance looked at me. What are you thinking, Thad? We have enough here to send them all to prison for 20 years. Fraud, forgery, conspiracy, money laundering. I can call the FBI right now. No, I said, not yet. Why? Vance asked, surprised. Because prison is too easy, I said. Prison gives them 3 meals a day. Prison gives them an excuse to be victims. I want something else. I walked over to the safe in the corner, the real safe. I spun the dial. Heavy tumblers clicked into place. I pulled the heavy steel door open. Inside were stacks of cash deeds and the original incorporation papers of King Industries. I grabbed a stack of cash and tossed it onto the desk next to Vance's computer. I want to destroy them, Jeremiah, but not with handcuffs. I want to destroy them with the truth. I want them to tear each other apart. How? Vance asked. Tiffany wants to leave on Friday, I asked. Let's make sure she makes her flight. But let's make sure she doesn't go alone. And Dante owes the mob a warehouse. Let's invite his creditors to a meeting. I turned to Vance, a plan forming in my mind that was as precise and ruthless as a military operation. You said Dante promised them the warehouse once I was out of the picture. Yes. Then let's take me out of the picture, I said. Vance looked at me, confusion clouding his face. You want to fake your death again? No, I said. I want to give them exactly what they want. I want to give them the victory. I want Bernice to think she has the house. I want Dante to think he has the business. And I want Tiffany to think she has the money. I leaned in close to Vance, my eyes burning with a cold fire. And then when they are standing on top of the mountain, drunk on their own success, thinking they have finally gotten away with it, I want to pull the rug out. I want them to fall so far and so fast that they won't know they hit the ground until the dirt is covering their faces. Vance slowly smiled. He closed his laptop. I love it when you get biblical, Thad. I'm not getting biblical, I said, picking up the forged deed and ripping it in half. I'm getting even. I looked at the clock. It was 3:00 a.m. The sun would be up in a few hours. The silver alert was still running. The city thought I was a lost old man. Let's get to work, Jeremiah, I said. I have a funeral to plan, and I want it to be the event of the season. We spent the next 3 hours drafting documents that would turn their dreams into nightmares. We didn't need the police. We had something better. We had their greed. And greed, as I had learned a long time ago, was the easiest trap to bait. By the time dawn broke over the industrial park, the plan was set. I wasn't Thaddeus King, the victim, anymore. I was the puppet master. And it was time to make my dolls dance. Disappearing is an art form. Most people think it is about running away, about finding a beach in Mexico and drinking margaritas while the world forgets your name. But real disappearing, the kind that keeps you alive when wolves are hunting you, is about control. It is not about absence. It is about creating a presence that is so convincing, so final, that your enemies stop looking over their shoulders. I didn't just need to leave town, I needed to die. Or at least I needed the version of Thaddeus King they were hunting to cease to exist. I sat in the warehouse, the air cold and smelling of iron and grease, and I made the call to Big Mike. It was a request that would have made a lesser man hang up the phone, but Mike just listened, grunted, and asked what time. 2 hours later, a beat-up Ford sedan painted to match the color of the truck I usually drove for work was pushed off a pier into the dark, churning waters of the Calumet River. It wasn't my truck, of course. My truck was safe inside the warehouse. But to a traffic camera at night and to a witness paid $50 to look the other way, it was a tragedy waiting to make the 6 o'clock news. I watched the report on the small television in my office. The anchorwoman, looking grave, announced that a vehicle matching the description of the missing endangered senior Thaddeus King had been seen plunging into the water. Divers were en route, she said, but given the currents and the freezing temperatures, hope was slim. It was a grim thing to watch your own obituary being written in real time, but it was necessary. I needed to see how they would react. I needed to know if there was any humanity left in the people I had called family for 20 years. I put on my headset and tuned into the listening device I had planted in the living room. I expected tears. I expected panic. I expected Bernice to perhaps feel a pang of guilt that she had driven her husband to a watery grave. What I heard was the pop of a cork. Champagne. They were celebrating. "I am telling you, Ma, it is over." Dante's voice boomed through the earpiece. He sounded drunk. Drunk on liquor and drunk on the idea that he had won. "The cops said the current is strong. They won't find a body for weeks. By the time they do, the fish will have done the work. We can file for the insurance payout based on the police report of the accident." "It is clean. It is a miracle," Bernice said. Her voice wasn't sad. It was breathless with relief. "I was so worried he would come back and change the will. I was so worried he would find out about the house. But now it is all ours." They were dividing my life up like vultures picking at a carcass before the heart had even stopped beating. I listened as Dante made a phone call. I heard him dialing, and then his voice changed, becoming servile, desperate. "Yeah, it is Dante. Listen, the problem is solved. The old man is gone. The warehouse is yours. I can get you the keys by Monday. We can start moving the inventory in. Yeah, 50 cars a week, just like I promised. We are going to be rich." He was selling King Industries. He was selling my legacy to a chop shop gang before the water had even settled over my supposed grave. Then I heard Tiffany. She was further away from the microphone, probably in the kitchen. She was on the phone too. "Yes, upgrade it to first class," she was saying. "One way to Paris. No, just one ticket. My husband, he has business to attend to here. I will be traveling alone." The trifecta of betrayal was complete. Bernice wanted the house. Dante wanted the business. And Tiffany wanted the cash and a new life. They were all moving pieces on a chessboard, thinking they were the kings and queens, not realizing they were just pawns about to be swept off the table. But to sweep them off, I needed one last thing. I had the recordings. I had the forged deed. But I needed the list. I needed the physical proof of Dante's debt and his connection to the Red Line gang. I knew he kept a ledger. He was old school in his stupidity. He wrote things down because he couldn't keep his lies straight in his head. If I could get that book, I could hand him over to the FBI wrapped in a bow. And I knew exactly where it was. He kept it in the false bottom of his sneaker box in his old bedroom at our house. He thought it was clever. He didn't know I had watched him hide his weed there when he was 16. I couldn't send Vance. I couldn't send the police. I had to go myself. I looked at the mirror in the warehouse bathroom. Thaddeus King, the businessman, couldn't walk into that house, but nobody looks at the help. Nobody pays attention to the invisible men who keep the lights on and the water running. I went to the supply locker. I pulled out a gray jumpsuit with the logo of the City Electric Company. I found a hard hat, a pair of thick safety goggles, and a heavy tool belt. I smeared a little grease on my cheek, not enough to look dirty, just enough to obscure my features. I put on a high-visibility vest. It is ironic, really. If you want to hide, you wear neon yellow. People see the vest, not the man. I drove a utility van I kept for fleet maintenance to the neighborhood. I parked 2 houses down. It was mid-afternoon now. The morning party was in full swing inside. I walked up the driveway of my own home. I walked with a clipboard in my hand, my head down, looking busy. I didn't ring the bell. I walked straight to the side of the house where the master breaker box was located. I knew the layout. I knew that if I cut the main power for just a second, it would trip the security alarm system into a reset mode, causing it to beep loudly in the hallway. I pulled the lever. Clunk. The hum of the AC unit died. I waited 5 seconds and pushed it back up. Power restored. Inside, the alarm panel started chirping, a low battery warning signal. It was annoying. It was persistent. I walked to the front door and rang the bell. Dante opened it. He was holding a glass of scotch. He looked flushed happy. He looked right at me and he didn't see his stepfather. He saw a gray jumpsuit and a clipboard. "Yeah, what do you want?" he asked, annoyed. "City Electric." I grunted, keeping my voice low and changing the cadence. We picked up a surge in the grid. "Your breaker might be frying. You hear that beeping?" "Yeah, the damn alarm is going crazy," Dante said. "That is the surge," I said. "I need to check the sub-panel inside or the whole house could go up. Fire hazard." Dante rolled his eyes. He sighed a dramatic, entitled sigh. "Fine. Make it fast. We are grieving in here." He stepped aside. I walked into my own house. The smell hit me first. Expensive perfume, stale alcohol, and the underlying scent of roasted meat. The living room was a mess. Bernice was sitting on the sofa looking at a catalog of luxury cruises. She didn't even look up as I walked past. I was just a worker. I was furniture. "The sub-panel is in the back hallway," I muttered. I walked past them. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would shake the clipboard in my hand, but I kept my grip loose. I walked past the photos on the wall, photos of me and Bernice, smiling in Hawaii, photos of Dante's graduation that I paid for. They were just images now, lies framed in glass. I turned the corner into the hallway. The sub-panel was there, but so was the door to Dante's old room. I checked behind me. Dante had gone back to the living room. I heard him laughing. "Some fuse blew. Whatever. Pour me another one." I slipped into the bedroom. It smelled of stale smoke and desperation. It looked exactly like it did when he was a teenager, messy, chaotic. I went straight to the closet. The sneaker boxes were stacked in a tower of consumerism. Jordans, Yeezys, thousands of dollars of footwear paid for by my hard work. I found the box, the black and red Jordan 1s. I opened it. The shoes were there. I lifted them out. I pulled up the cardboard insert. There it was, a small, black moleskin notebook. I flipped it open. My hands were shaking slightly now. The pages were filled with names, dates, and numbers. Red line, 50K due. Big Sal, 20K due. Warehouse handoff, Monday. It was all there. The confession. The motive. The death sentence. I slipped the notebook into my tool belt under the hammer loop. I turned to leave and the doorknob turned. I froze. The door opened and Tiffany walked in. She was on her phone whispering furiously. She didn't see me immediately because she was looking down, checking her nails. "I said I need the transfer to clear by tonight," she hissed. "If the old man is dead, the accounts might get frozen for probate. I need to move the rest of it now." She looked up. She saw me standing in the closet doorway. For a second time, stopped. She looked at the goggles, the hard hat, the grease on my face. Her eyes narrowed. She was sharper than Dante. She sensed something. "Who are you?" she asked, lowering the phone. "What are you doing in here? The electric panel is in the hall." "Checking the outlets, ma'am," I said, making my voice gravelly. "Surge blew out the sockets in this room. Just testing the current." I held up a voltage tester, creating a menacing click. She stared at me. She looked at my hands. My hands are distinct. Large, calloused, with a small scar on the left thumb from a welding accident in '84. I saw her gaze drift to that scar. I saw the recognition spark in her eyes. It started as confusion, then morphed into shock. Her mouth opened to scream. I didn't give her the chance. I stepped forward, invading her space, using my size to intimidate. I put a finger to my lips, the universal sign for silence. But I didn't say, "Shh." I leaned in, and in my normal voice, the voice of the man who owned the house she was standing in, I whispered, "Don't miss your flight, Tiffany. Paris is beautiful this time of year." Her face went white, pure ghostly white. She stumbled back, dropping her phone. She hit the doorframe. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't speak. She was looking at a ghost. I walked past her. I walked right out of the bedroom. I walked down the hall past Dante, who was pouring a drink, past Bernice, who was dreaming of the ocean. "All good folks," I called out as I reached the front door. "Just a loose wire. You are safe now." I walked out the front door, down the driveway, and got into the van. I didn't run. I drove away at the speed limit. In the rearview mirror, I saw the front door open. Tiffany stumbled out, looking around wildly, gasping for air. But I was already turning the corner. I had the book, I had the leverage, and I had planted the seed of absolute terror in the heart of the smartest enemy I had. She wouldn't tell them. I knew she wouldn't. She would run. She would run faster than before because now she knew the dead man was walking. And when she ran, the whole house of cards would come crashing down. I patted the notebook in my belt. The funeral was going to be a hell of a show. And I had the guest list right here. The pepperoni pizza on the paper plate in front of me was cold. The grease had congealed into little orange pools, but I ate it anyway. I wasn't eating for pleasure. I was fueling a machine. My body was that machine. And right now it was running on caffeine, adrenaline, and a cold, simmering rage that kept my hands steady while my world burned down on a 24-inch LCD screen. I sat in the darkness of the warehouse office, surrounded by the smell of motor oil and dust, watching the local news. The chyron at the bottom of the screen read, "Breaking news tragedy at Calumet River." The volume was turned up, filling the small concrete room with the polished, practiced voice of a reporter standing in the rain. Behind him, the flashing lights of police cruisers and emergency vehicles painted the night in strokes of chaotic blue and red. And behind them, a crane was hoisting a dripping, mud-caked Ford sedan out of the black water. It looked like a carcass. The windshield was shattered. The roof was caved in. It was a violent, ugly thing to look at, and for a split second, a shiver ran down my spine. That was supposed to be my tomb. If I had been a weaker man, if I had been the confused, senile old fool they painted me to be, I would be inside that crushed metal right now, my lungs filled with river water, my story ending in silence. But I wasn't in the river. I was in a chair, wiping tomato sauce from my lip, watching my murderers perform the greatest show of their lives. The camera cut from the car to a podium set up under a police tent, and there she was. Bernice. She was wearing black. Not just any black, but a dress I recognized. It was the dress she bought for her mother's funeral 5 years ago. It was modest, elegant, and screamed grief. She was holding a handkerchief to her face, her shoulders shaking with what looked like uncontrollable sobbing. A police chaplain had his hand on her back, comforting the poor, distraught widow. I leaned forward, studying her face on the screen. It was a masterpiece of deception. The red eyes, the trembling lips. If I didn't know she had laced my milk with rat poison less than 24 hours ago, I would have wanted to reach through the screen and hug her. Mrs. King, the reporter asked, shoving a microphone toward her. "We know this is a difficult time. The police have confirmed the vehicle belongs to your husband, Thaddeus King. They haven't found a body yet, but given the conditions." Bernice looked up. She looked directly into the camera lens. She wasn't looking at the audience. She was looking at the insurance adjuster she hoped was watching. He was so confused. Bernice sobbed, her voice breaking perfectly. "We tried to stop him. We tried to get help. The police came yesterday. We begged them to keep him safe. But the dementia, it just took him away from us. He didn't know what he was doing. He must have gotten lost and... oh, God." She collapsed into the chaplain's arms. I took a bite of the cold pizza. I chewed slowly, feeling the crunch of the crust. "Liar," I whispered. "You didn't beg them to keep me safe. You begged them to lock me up so you could steal the deed to the house." The narrative was being cemented in real time. Thaddeus King, the senile old man. Thaddeus King, the tragic accident. Thaddeus King, the burden that was finally gone. She was washing her hands of my murder by painting it as a medical inevitability. It was brilliant. It was clean. And it made me want to vomit. Then the camera panned to the right. Dante stepped into the frame. My stepson looked sharp. He was wearing a suit I had bought him for a job interview he never went to. He had his arm around Bernice, playing the dutiful, protective son. But I saw the sweat on his upper lip. I saw the way his eyes darted around, not with grief, but with nervous energy. He was high on the adrenaline of getting away with it. "We are devastated," Dante said, his voice deep and somber. He was trying to sound like a man, but he just sounded like a boy wearing his father's shoes. Thaddeus was... he was a difficult man toward the end. The illness made him aggressive. But we loved him. We tried everything. He paused, looking down as if overcoming emotion. Then he looked up, and I saw the greed shine through his eyes like a beacon. "But we want to assure the community, and especially the employees and partners of King Industries, that the legacy will continue. My father, well, my stepfather, he built a great company. And even though he wasn't in his right mind recently, I know he would want us to keep it going. As his heir, I plan to step up immediately to ensure operations continue smoothly. We are asking for privacy and perhaps donations to the Alzheimer's Association in his name as we navigate this tragedy. I laughed. It was a harsh barking sound that echoed off the steel beams of the warehouse. Heir. He called himself the heir. The body wasn't even found because there was no body and he was already claiming the throne. And donations, he was asking for money. He was probably already calculating how much he could skim off the top of a charity drive. I looked at the time on the screen. It was the 10 o'clock news. They were live. They were confident. They thought the river had swallowed the truth. I put the pizza crust down on the desk. I wiped my hands on a shop rag. "You want a legacy, Dante?" I said to the screen. "I will give you a legacy." I turned to my laptop. The external hard drive I had rescued from the house was plugged in, its little blue light blinking steadily. I opened the folder labeled Garage Security Backup. I clicked on the file dated 2 days ago. Timestamp 2:14 p.m. The video player opened. The image was crisp and clear in black and white. It showed the interior of my garage. It showed the pristine Mustang. And it showed Dante wearing those expensive sneakers sliding out from underneath the chassis. I watched it again. I watched him hold up the wire cutters. I watched him pull out his phone. The audio was clear thanks to the high-end microphone I had installed to monitor the engine diagnostics when I was tuning cars. "It is done, Ma. Yeah, the brake lines are clean cut. Tomorrow morning that old fool goes off the cliff. You get the insurance money, I get my cut." I paused the video on the frame where Dante was smiling, the wire cutters held up like a trophy. It was the most disgusting thing I had ever seen. A son celebrating the murder of the man who raised him. But it was also the most beautiful thing I possessed. It was the silver bullet. I opened my secure email client. I typed in Jeremiah Vance's address. Subject, the eulogy. I attached the video file. I also attached the audio file from the living room, the one where Tiffany outlined the plan to commit me to the asylum and the one where Bernice discussed the poison. I typed a short message. "Jerome, here is the movie for the funeral. Do not share it with the police yet. The police will just arrest them. I want to break them first. Bring the projector to the service. And bring the biggest screen you can find." I hit send. I watched the progress bar crawl across the screen. Sending. Sending. Sent. I leaned back in my chair. On the TV, the reporter was wrapping up. "A tragic end for a local businessman," he said solemnly. "Thaddeus King dead at 72. Not dead," I corrected him. "Just undercover." I looked at the image of Bernice and Dante hugging on the screen. They looked so relieved. They looked like they had just dropped a heavy weight. They had no idea that the weight wasn't gone. It was just hanging over their heads, suspended by a thread that I was holding. And I was about to cut it. I closed the laptop. I picked up the last slice of pizza. It was cold, it was rubbery, and it was the best meal I had ever tasted. "Enjoy the party, folks," I whispered, "because the hangover is going to be lethal." I stood up and walked over to the cot where Buster was sleeping. I patted his head. "Tomorrow is a travel day, Buster," I told him. "We have one more stop to make before the funeral. We need to go see a man about a warehouse." Dante had promised my warehouse to the Red Line gang. I thought it was only polite that I introduced myself to his business partners. After all, if they were expecting a delivery on Monday, I didn't want to disappoint them. I just wanted to make sure they knew exactly who was signing the receipt. The news ended. A commercial for detergent came on. I turned off the TV. The warehouse plunged back into silence. But it wasn't an empty silence anymore. It was the silence of a predator waiting in the tall grass. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now all I had to do was wait for the snap. Divide and conquer. It is the oldest military strategy in the book because it works. You can fight an army that stands united, but you can slaughter an army that is fighting itself. I sat in the cold silence of the warehouse, the blue light of the monitors reflecting in my eyes, preparing to fire the shot that would shatter the alliance between my wife, her son, and the woman who was smarter than both of them combined. Tiffany was the key. Bernice was motivated by desperation and a twisted sense of entitlement. Dante was motivated by fear of the mob, but Tiffany was motivated by pure, unadulterated self-interest. She had no loyalty to the name King, and she certainly had no loyalty to a husband she was already planning to leave. She was a survivor, a rat who would chew through her own leg to escape a trap. I just needed to show her that the trap was closing and that Dante was the one holding the spring. I looked at the dossier Vance had compiled. It was nasty stuff. Dante wasn't just a gambler and a thief. He was a fool who talked too much. 3 weeks ago, while drunk at a bar near the river, he had bragged to a cocktail waitress about how he was going to be rich soon and how he was going to dump his uptight wife the moment the check cleared. He had even sent the waitress photos of him holding stacks of my cash photos of him in bed with her. But the real weapon wasn't the affair. Tiffany probably knew about the cheating and didn't care as long as the checks didn't bounce. The real weapon was a recording Vance had pulled from Dante's cloud, a voice memo he had recorded for himself, a drunken diary entry he probably thought made him sound like a gangster. I clicked on the file. Dante's voice, slurred and arrogant, filled the warehouse. If the cops ever get wise about the breaks or the poison, I am covered. I kept the receipts in Tiffany's car. I used her credit card for the wire cutters. I will just tell them she was the one pushing for it. She is the one who hates the old man. I am just the grieving son. They will never believe the white girl over the grieving black son. She goes down, I keep the money. Simple. I smiled. It was perfect. He was planning to frame her, just as she was planning to frame him. It was a snake eating its own tail. I picked up the burner phone. I typed Tiffany's number. I didn't add a subject line. I just attached the photos of Dante with the waitress and the audio file. Then I typed 7 words. He is selling you out. Fly away. I hit send. I switched the audio feed to the living room bug. It was quiet in the house. The funeral was tomorrow. They were probably trying to sleep, or maybe they were packing. I heard the ding of a notification, then silence, then another ding. I imagined her picking up the phone. I imagined the glow of the screen illuminating her face in the dark bedroom. I imagined her thumb hovering over the play button. Then I heard it, a sharp intake of breath, the rustle of sheets, footsteps pacing back and forth on the hardwood floor, fast, frantic steps. "You bastard," she whispered. Her voice was trembling, but not with fear, with fury. "You dirty, backstabbing bastard." She wasn't talking to me. She was talking to the digital ghost of her husband. She played the audio again. I will just tell them she was the one pushing for it. I used her credit card. I heard the sound of glass shattering. She must have thrown a vase or a glass against the wall. Then I heard her running. Not to Dante's room to confront him. No, that would be too emotional. She ran to the guest room where she was staying. I heard the sound of zippers. She was packing. She was accelerating her timeline. But she couldn't just leave. If she left now and Dante executed his plan to frame her, she would be picked up at the airport. She needed leverage. She needed immunity. Her phone rang. It was me calling from the burner. I let it ring twice. She answered. "Who is this?" she hissed. Her voice was pure venom. "Is this you? Is this the electrician I didn't speak?" I used a text-to-speech app I had loaded on the laptop. The voice was mechanical, cold, devoid of humanity. "Dante has already called the detective," the robotic voice said. "He is meeting them after the funeral. He is giving them the credit card records. You are the fall guy, Tiffany." "Liar," she screamed into the phone, but there was no conviction in it. She believed it. It confirmed her worst fears. He wouldn't dare. "I know where the bodies are buried." "Then prove it," the voice said. "The police won't listen to a fugitive, but they will listen to a witness with evidence. You have one chance to save yourself." "What do you want?" she demanded. She was bargaining now. The tears were gone. This was business. "I want the receipts," the voice said. "The ones he said he planted in your car. And I want the poison. I know he bought it. I know you kept the bottle to hold over him." There was a long silence. I could hear her breathing ragged and shallow. She was weighing her options. If she gave up the evidence, she admitted complicity. But if she didn't, she went down for murder alone. "If I give them to you?" "What do I get?" she asked. "You get to board your plane," the voice said. "You get to walk away. The evidence destroys Dante, not you. We will paint you as the reluctant wife who was too scared to speak up until now. You become the victim." "Who are you?" she whispered. "Why are you doing this, Justice?" the voice said. "Bring the evidence to the funeral, front row. When the service starts, look for the man in the back. Do not tell Dante. Do not tell Bernice. If you do, the deal is off and the police get the audio of you planning the conservatorship. The line went dead. I took the headset off and leaned back. The fish was in the boat. She wasn't just going to turn on him. She was going to destroy him publicly to save her own skin. I checked the time. 4:00 a.m. The funeral was at 10:00. I had one last thing to prepare. I opened the safe and pulled out my own suit, a black three-piece wool suit that I usually wore to board meetings. I polished my shoes until I could see my reflection in the leather. I wasn't going to this funeral as a mechanic. I wasn't going as a victim. I was going as the CEO of my own life. I looked at the dossier on the desk. Tiffany thought she was making a deal with a stranger. She thought she was buying her freedom. She didn't realize that in my world there is no immunity for traitors. She would hand over the evidence that convicted Dante, yes, but she had forgotten one thing. The audio of her conspiring to lock me away was already in Vance's briefcase. She wasn't buying a ticket to Paris. She was buying a ticket to the cell right next to her husband. But first, I needed her to play her part. I needed her to stand up in that church and point the finger. I needed the world to see them tear each other apart. My phone buzzed. A text from Tiffany. I have the bottle and the Home Depot receipt for the cutters. He paid cash, but he made me hold the receipt for the warranty. Idiot. I will be there. I stared at the screen. Warranty. Dante kept a receipt for wire cutters used in a murder because he wanted the warranty. The banality of his stupidity was almost impressive. Good, I typed back. Wear black. I stood up and walked to the roll-up door of the warehouse. I pressed the button. The metal door rattled up, revealing the pre-dawn sky. It was gray and weeping rain. Perfect weather for a resurrection. I went to the back of the warehouse where my 1967 Shelby GT500 sat under a tarp. I pulled the cover off. The black paint shone like obsidian. I hadn't driven this car in 2 years. It was loud. It was aggressive. It was the car of a man who didn't care what the neighbors thought. I opened the door and slid into the leather seat. I turned the key. The engine roared to life, a deep guttural growl that shook the concrete floor. Buster barked from the office, excited by the noise. "Let's go, boy," I called out. I wasn't taking the utility van today. I was driving the Shelby. I wanted them to hear me coming before they saw me. I wanted the ground to shake while they were reading their fake eulogies. I drove out into the rain, the tires slick on the wet pavement. The city was waking up unaware that a dead man was driving through its streets. I felt a strange sense of calm. The anger was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. They had tried to bury me in the dark. They had tried to erase my mind. They had tried to sell my legacy for scraps. Today I was going to remind them who built the roof they were sleeping under, and then I was going to pull it down on top of their heads. The rain was falling in sheets against the stained glass windows of St. Jude's Cathedral, a rhythmic drumming that sounded like fingers tapping impatiently on a table. It was fitting weather for a funeral with no body of service for a man who was sitting in a black muscle car a block away, watching the mourners arrive through the rhythmic sweep of windshield wipers. I adjusted the rearview mirror, checking my tie. I wasn't wearing the grease-stained jumpsuit of a mechanic or the hospital gown of a dementia patient. I was wearing a bespoke Italian suit, charcoal gray, the kind of suit that commands silence when you walk into a boardroom. My reflection stared back at me hard and unyielding. The eyes were the same, but the man behind them had changed. The Thaddeus King who built a business on trust and handshakes was gone, drowned in the metaphorical river of betrayal. The man sitting in the Shelby was something else entirely. I was the reckoning. I watched as the cars pulled up. There were so many of them. My employees from the steel mill arrived in a convoy of pickup trucks, men with rough hands and honest faces wiping rain from their eyes. Big Mike was there, looking uncomfortable in a suit that was 2 sizes too small, holding a bouquet of lilies like they were fragile glass. Seeing the genuine grief etched into the lines of their faces caused a lump to form in my throat. These men thought I was dead. They thought their leader, their friend, had wandered off into the cold, dark water because his mind had betrayed him. They were here to pay respects to a life well lived. Then the limousine arrived. It was long, black, and ostentatious. The driver hopped out with an umbrella, opening the back door. Bernice stepped out first. She paused for a moment, looking up at the gray sky, a performance of tragic beauty for anyone watching. She leaned heavily on the driver's arm, her face hidden behind a black veil. Dante followed her. He smoothed his suit jacket, checked his watch, and ran a hand through his hair. He didn't look like a grieving son. He looked like a man about to accept an award. And finally, Tiffany. She looked pale, her eyes darting around the street nervously. She was clutching her purse tightly against her chest. I knew what was in that purse, a receipt from Home Depot and a bottle of rat poison. She was the walking evidence locker that would seal the coffin, but not mine. I waited until everyone had filed inside. The street was empty. I opened the door of the Shelby and stepped out into the rain. I didn't use an umbrella. I let the water hit my face, cold and shocking. It felt like a baptism. I walked to the side entrance of the church, the one that led to the choir loft. I had donated the funds to restore this roof 10 years ago. I knew every door, every lock. I slipped inside, shaking the water from my coat, and climbed the narrow spiral staircase. From the shadows of the loft, looking down through the wooden railing, the sanctuary was a sea of black. The air was thick with the smell of incense and damp wool. At the front, surrounded by floral arrangements that cost more than my first car, was a closed mahogany casket. It was empty, of course. Or maybe they had filled it with sandbags to give it weight. It didn't matter. It was a prop in their play. Jeremiah Vance was sitting in the back row, right next to the audio-visual booth. He caught my eye in the shadows and gave a barely perceptible nod. He had done his job. The technician in the booth had been paid generously to take a coffee break at exactly 10:15. The priest, a good man who had no idea he was presiding over a farce, began the service. He spoke of my kindness, my generosity, my service in the Marines. He spoke of how tragedy often strikes the strongest among us, stealing our minds before it steals our bodies. Bernice sobbed loudly at the appropriate moments, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief. It was a flawless performance. She deserved an Oscar. Then it was Dante's turn. He stood up from the front pew and walked to the pulpit. He gripped the sides of the wooden stand, looking out over the crowd. He took a deep, shuddering breath. Friends, family, employees of King Industries. Dante began, his voice thick with manufactured emotion. We are gathered here today to say goodbye to a titan. Thaddeus King was not just my stepfather. He was the father I never had. He was my mentor, my rock. I gripped the railing of the choir loft so hard the wood creaked. The audacity was breathtaking. This was the man who had called me a cheap old bastard while holding wire cutters. This was the man who had planned to sell my life's work to a chop shop. He taught me everything I know about business. Dante continued, looking toward the cameras that were live streaming the service for those who couldn't attend. He taught me that a man's word is his bond. He taught me that integrity is the currency of the soul. It breaks my heart that in his final days his mind was so clouded by illness that he didn't know how much we loved him. He paused to wipe a tear, a single perfect tear. I know there are rumors, Dante said, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Rumors about the accident, about his state of mind. But let me assure you, my mother and I did everything we could to protect him. We tried to get him help. We tried to keep him safe. But God had other plans. And now, as I step into his shoes to lead King Industries into the future, I promise to honor his memory by making this company greater than ever. The crowd murmured their approval. A few people nodded. He had them. He had charmed them. He was wrapping himself in my legacy like a warm blanket. Behind him, a large projection screen was cycling through photos of my life. There was a picture of me in Vietnam, a picture of me and Bernice at our wedding, a picture of me holding Dante's daughter, Olivia. I looked down at Vance. He was looking at his watch. Dante was winding up for his big finish. I will miss you, Dad, Dante said, looking up at the ceiling as if talking to heaven. I hope you are looking down on us. I hope you can see how much we care. I hope you are finally at peace. He bowed his head. The church was silent. It was a holy moment. Then the screen flickered. The photo of me fishing on Lake Michigan froze. It distorted pixels, tearing across the image. A loud screech of static cut through the silence, making people jump. Dante looked back, confused. He tapped the microphone. Is the sound working? The screen went black for a second. Then it flashed white. A new video appeared. It wasn't a photo. It was grainy black and white footage. The angle was low, looking out from the corner of a garage. The congregation gasped. They recognized the setting. It was my garage. On the screen, a pair of legs slid out from under a classic Mustang. The figure stood up. It was Dante. He was wearing the same expensive watch he was wearing right now in the pulpit. He was holding a pair of heavy-duty wire cutters. The audio crackled to life, booming through the church's high-end sound system. It was loud, deafeningly loud. It is done, Ma. Dante's voice filled the sanctuary. It wasn't the somber, grieving voice from the pulpit. It was the cocky, arrogant voice of a killer. Dante froze. He stared at the screen, his mouth open. He looked like he had been struck by lightning. "Yeah, the brake lines are clean cut, the video," Dante said, laughing as he wiped grease onto his jeans. "The fluid is already pooling. When he hits that downhill curve on Route 9 tomorrow, the pedal is going to go straight to the floor. No brakes, no steering, just a straight shot into the ravine." A collective scream rose from the pews. Bernice stood up, her hands covering her mouth. Tiffany turned around, her eyes wide, but she didn't look surprised. She looked terrified of the mob, not the video. Dante turned to the crowd, waving his hands frantically. "Turn it off," he screamed. "It is a fake. It is AI. Someone hacked the system. Turn it off." But the video kept playing. "Don't worry," the voice on the screen continued. "By the time they haul the wreck up, it will look like mechanical failure. Everyone knows the old man does his own work. They will say he got senile. You get the insurance money, I get my cut, and we are finally free of that cheap old bastard." "Cheap old bastard." The words echoed off the vaulted ceiling, bouncing back to slap Dante in the face. The screen switched. It wasn't over. Now it was a still image. An audio waveform appeared. "The medicine. Tonight. Double the dose." It was Bernice's voice, clear as a bell. Then another clip. Tiffany's voice. "We don't kill him. We neutralize him. We get him committed. We control the fortune." The church was in chaos. People were standing up shouting. Big Mike was already moving out of his pew, his face a mask of fury, heading toward the aisle. The business partners, the tough men from the steel unions, were looking at Dante with eyes that promised violence. Dante was backed against the pulpit, looking for an escape route. He looked at Bernice. She had collapsed onto the floor, wailing, but nobody was comforting her this time. "Where's this coming from?" Dante shrieked, his voice cracking. "Who is doing this?" I stepped out of the shadows of the choir loft. I walked to the railing, looking down at the sinners in the hands of an angry God. I didn't need a microphone. My voice honed on the drill fields of Paris Island, carried to every corner of the room. "Hello, son," I boomed. The entire church went silent. Every head turned upward. Dante looked up, squinting against the lights. I leaned over the railing, letting the light hit my face. "You asked if I was looking down on you," I said, my voice cold and hard. "Well, here I am, and I don't like what I see." Dante's knees gave out. He slumped against the pulpit, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor. He looked like a child who had been caught playing with matches while the house burned down around him. I turned and began to walk down the stairs. The funeral was over. The resurrection had begun, and I had a lot of handshakes to make before the police arrived. The air in the church felt electric, charged with the shock of the truth. I adjusted my cuffs as I descended the spiral staircase. I could hear the murmur of the crowd turning into a roar. They weren't mourning anymore. They were witnessing a judgment, and I was the judge, jury, and executioner. The silence that followed the video was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a dam holding back 1 billion gallons of water, the terrifying split second before the concrete cracks and the flood destroys everything in its path. For a heartbeat, the only sound in St. Jude's Cathedral was the hum of the projector fan cooling down and the ragged, terrified breathing of my stepson, who was huddled at the base of the pulpit like a rat caught in a spotlight. Then the dam broke. The sanctuary erupted. It wasn't a murmur of confusion, it was a roar of outrage. 300 people, including the steelworkers from my mill who had hands like sledgehammers and tempers to match, rose to their feet. They weren't looking at the altar with reverence anymore. They were looking at Dante with the kind of fury that starts riots. Big Mike was already climbing over the pew, his face purple with rage, shouting something that would have made the priest faint if he could hear it over the noise. Dante scrambled backward, knocking over a vase of white lilies. The water spilled across the polished floor, mixing with the sweat dripping off his face. He looked at the screen, then at the crowd, his eyes wide and frantic, searching for an exit, searching for a lie that could save him. But there are no lies big enough to cover a video of you confessing to murder in high definition. Bernice was still on the floor, but she wasn't wailing anymore. She was frozen, staring at the blank screen as if hoping it would change, hoping it would rewind and show a different movie, one where she was the grieving widow and I was safely dead in the river. She looked small. She looked pathetic. And for the first time in 20 years, she looked absolutely powerless. That was my cue. I didn't run in. I didn't shout. I simply pushed open the heavy oak doors at the back of the nave. They swung inward with a deep, resonant boom that cut through the chaos like a gavel striking a judge's bench. The sound turned heads, first the people in the back row, then the middle, and finally, like a wave crashing against the shore, The silence returned, rolling from the back of the church to the front. But this was a different kind of silence. This was the silence of awe. I stepped into the aisle. I wasn't wearing the gray jumpsuit. I wasn't wearing the flannel shirt or the oil-stained work boots they were used to seeing me in. I was wearing a three-piece suit cut from charcoal Italian wool tailored to fit my shoulders perfectly. My shirt was crisp white silk. My tie was a deep blood red. And on my feet, instead of heavy steel-toed boots, I wore hand-stitched leather Oxfords that shone like black mirrors. I walked down the center aisle. My cane tapped against the stone floor, not because I needed it, but because it set the rhythm. Click, step, click, step. It was the sound of a clock counting down the remaining seconds of their freedom. The crowd parted for me. People I had known for decades, neighbors who had only ever seen me under the hood of a car, gasped. They didn't recognize me at first. They saw the posture. They saw the clothes. They saw the power radiating off me like heat off an engine block. Is that, Thad, someone whispered. No, another voice answered. That is Mr. King. I kept my eyes locked on the altar. I didn't look at the police officers who had quietly entered from the side doors led by Jeremiah Vance. I didn't look at Tiffany, who was clutching her purse in the front row, her face the color of ash. I only looked at Dante. He was trying to stand up, slipping in the spilled flower water. He grabbed the edge of the casket to hoist himself up the empty casket he had bought to bury a lie. When he finally got to his feet, he saw me. He blinked. He rubbed his eyes. He shook his head violently as if trying to wake up from a nightmare. Dad, he croaked. His voice was a broken thing. You are dead. The car. The river. I stopped 10 feet away from him. I planted my cane on the floor and rested both hands on the silver handle. I looked him up and down, taking in the cheap suit, the trembling hands, the utter lack of spine. I am not a ghost, Dante, I said. My voice was calm, deep, and amplified by the acoustics of the church. I am the man who taught you how to tie your shoes. I am the man who paid for your private school. And I am the man whose brake lines you cut with a pair of $20 pliers. Dante stumbled back, hitting the pulpit. No, it was a joke. The video is a fake. It is a deep fake. I never did that. Ma, tell him it is a lie. He looked at Bernice for help, but Bernice couldn't speak. She was staring at me, her eyes locked on my suit. She was processing something that terrified her more than the police. She was processing the fact that the husband she thought she knew, the simple man she planned to discard, was standing there looking like a king. I took another step forward. You want to talk about jokes, Dante, I asked. The joke is that you thought you were smart enough to kill a man who survived the Tet offensive. You thought you could sell my company to a chop shop and walk away with a fortune. I reached into my jacket pocket. Dante flinched, thinking I had a gun. The police officers tensed. But I didn't pull out a weapon. I pulled out a small black notebook. I tossed it onto the floor at his feet. It landed with a heavy thud. Your ledger, son, I said. I believe you left this in your old sneaker box. It has all the names. The Red Line Gang, the debts, the dates. Dante looked at the book. His knees gave out again, and he slid down the front of the pulpit. He knew it was over. The video was bad, but the book was a death sentence. That is when the police moved in. Jeremiah Vance nodded to the detective. 4 officers marched up the aisle. They didn't run. They didn't need to. The targets weren't going anywhere. Dante King, you are under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud, the detective said, pulling Dante to his feet and spinning him around. The handcuffs clicked shut. Bernice finally found her voice. She scrambled to her feet, her veil tearing her hair wild. She pointed a shaking finger at me. You tricked us, she screamed. You evil, manipulative old man. You set us up. I looked at her. I didn't feel anger anymore. I just felt pity. I didn't set you up, Bernice, I said. I just let you be yourself. I gave you a rope and you tied the noose. She lunged at me, but a female officer caught her arm. Bernice struggled, her face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. You are nobody, she shrieked, spitting the words at me. You are nothing but a grease monkey, a dirty, low-class mechanic. You think that suit changes anything? You are still the man who comes home smelling like oil. You are a loser. Thad, a loser. The church went silent again. Her insults hung in the air, ugly and raw. She was trying to strip me of my dignity one last time. She was trying to remind everyone that I was just a laborer, and she was the one who deserved better. I started to speak to tell her that honest work was nothing to be ashamed of, but I was interrupted. "Excuse me, ma'am." The voice came from the third row. A man stood up. He was tall, wearing a suit that cost more than Bernice's entire wardrobe. He had gray hair and the bearing of a senator. It was Arthur Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Steel and one of the most powerful men in Chicago. He had been my business partner for 15 years, a silent partnership that we kept off the books to protect my privacy. Arthur walked out of the pew and stood next to me. He placed a hand on my shoulder. "I don't think you understand who you are speaking to," Arthur said, his voice dripping with icy politeness. Bernice stopped struggling. She looked at Arthur. She recognized him from the magazines she read from the charity galas she desperately wanted to be invited to. "Who are you?" she whispered. "I am Arthur Sterling," he said. "And this man, he isn't just a mechanic." Arthur turned to the crowd, raising his voice so the back row could hear. "Thaddeus King is the founder and majority shareholder of King Industries. He owns the patent for the hydraulic press system used in every automotive plant in the Midwest. He owns 40% of the industrial real estate in this district." Arthur looked back at Bernice, delivering the final blow with a smile that was sharp as a razor. "You called him a loser, Mrs. King. But the reality is, you have been sleeping next to a man worth $50 million for 20 years, and you were too busy looking down your nose at his work boots to notice the empire he built with his bare hands." Bernice's jaw dropped. The color drained from her face so fast she looked like a corpse. Her eyes went wide, darting from Arthur to me, then to the suit, then to the shoes. 50 million, she whispered. The number choked her. She looked at me with a new expression. It wasn't hatred, it was horror. It was the realization of what she had thrown away. She had tried to kill me for a $2 million insurance policy when she was married to a fortune 25 times that size. If she had just been a good wife, if she had just loved me, she would have had everything. I walked up to her. I leaned in close so only she could hear. "I was going to leave it all to you, Bernice," I said softly. "I had the papers drawn up last year. I wanted to surprise you for our anniversary. I wanted to take you on a cruise around the world. I wanted to give you the life you always wanted." I saw the tears well up in her eyes. Real tears this time. Tears of regret. Tears of absolute crushing loss. "But you wanted the quick cash," I said, straightening up. "You wanted the shortcut. Well, congratulations, Bernice. You got the house. But the bank is foreclosing on it tomorrow because the payments on that loan you took out are overdue. And the 50 million, that is going to a trust for children who actually appreciate the value of hard work. Officer, take her away." Bernice let out a wail that sounded like a wounded animal. She collapsed into the officer's arms, her legs refusing to hold her up. They had to drag her out of the church, her heels scraping against the stone floor, her screams echoing off the walls. "My money. It is my money. I am his wife." The doors slammed shut behind her, cutting off her screams. I turned back to the altar. Dante was already in cuffs, weeping silently. Tiffany was sitting in the front row, looking at me with a mixture of fear and hope. She thought her deal was still good. She thought she was safe. I caught Vance's eye. He gave me a small shake of his head. "Not yet. Let her sweat." I looked out at the congregation. My friends, my employees, my people. They were looking at me with shock, yes, but also with pride. They didn't care about the money. They cared that I was alive. I walked up to the microphone Dante had just vacated. I adjusted it. "I am sorry for the drama, folks," I said, my voice returning to the warm, rough cadence of Thaddeus the mechanic. But I couldn't let my own funeral go by without saying a few words. Laughter rippled through the room, nervous laughter but genuine. "There is pizza and beer at the warehouse," I said, "and everyone is on paid leave for the rest of the week. Let's go home." As the crowd erupted into cheers, I walked down the aisle out into the rain. The air tasted sweet. The weight was gone. I was alone, yes. My family was in handcuffs. But for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly who I was. And more importantly, I knew exactly who they were. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut in a cathedral is a sound you never forget. It echoes differently than it does on the street. It bounces off the stone walls and the stained glass, a sharp metallic bite that cuts through the heavy scent of lilies and incense. I watched as the detective spun Dante around, pressing his face against the polished wood of the pew where he had just sat pretending to mourn me. My stepson did not fight. He did not run. He simply dissolved. The arrogance that had carried him through the last 48 hours, the swagger he had worn like a costume, evaporated the moment the steel touched his wrists. He was weeping now, ugly, snotty tears that ran down his face and dripped onto his cheap suit. He looked at me one last time as they dragged him toward the side aisle, his eyes wide with the terrifying realization that the game was not just over, but that he had lost in a way he never imagined possible. I did not feel joy. I did not feel triumph. I felt a cold, heavy finality. It was like watching a building collapse after a controlled demolition. You know it has to come down because the structure is rotten, but there is still a sadness in seeing the dust settle on what used to be a home. But the demolition was not over yet. Bernice was still standing there. She had stopped screaming when the police grabbed Dante. She was watching them haul her son away, her mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. She looked around the room, seeing the faces of our friends, my employees, the church deacons. She saw the judgment in their eyes. She saw the disgust. And in that split second, her survival instinct kicked in. It was a primal, desperate thing, uglier than anything Dante had done. She turned to me. She threw herself at me, her hands grabbing the lapels of my charcoal suit. I smelled her perfume, a scent that for 20 years had meant comfort and home to me, and now smelled like a crime scene. "Thad," she wailed, her voice cracking. "Thad, you have to help him. You have to stop them. He is just a boy. He made a mistake." I stood like a statue. I did not move. I did not blink. I let her clutch at my chest, her fingernails digging into the fine wool. "He tried to kill me, Bernice," I said, my voice low and steady. "That is not a mistake. That is a choice." She shook her head frantically, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup, turning her into a grotesque mask of tragedy. "No, no, you don't understand," she cried. "He was desperate. He owed money to bad people. He didn't mean it. He loves you, Thad. We all love you." She was pivoting. She was rewriting history in real time. And then she played her final card. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and pleading, trying to summon the ghost of the woman I had married. "It wasn't me, Thad," she whispered loud enough for the officers nearby to hear. "I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know. He forced me to go along with it. He said he would hurt me if I didn't help him. I was a hostage in my own home. I am your wife, Thad. I am the woman who has taken care of you for 2 decades. You can't let them take me. You can't believe I would hurt you." It was a performance worthy of Broadway. If I hadn't been the man standing in the kitchen doorway the night before, if I hadn't been the man holding the evidence in my pocket, I might have faltered. I might have looked at this woman, this sobbing, broken creature, and wondered if there was a shred of truth in her words. But I was that man, and I knew the truth. I reached up and slowly, deliberately peeled her fingers off my suit. I held her wrists for a moment, feeling the pulse hammering beneath her skin. "You didn't know?" I asked softly. "No," she sobbed. "I swear on my mother's grave," I released her hands and reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I pulled out a small, clear plastic vial. Inside, the residue of the warm milk and the undissolved white granules sat like a quiet accusation. I held it up to the light coming through the stained glass. Bernice froze. Her eyes locked onto the vial. Her breathing stopped. "Do you recognize this, Bernice?" I asked. She took a step back. She shook her head, but it was a weak, trembling motion. "This is the milk you brought to my room last night," I said, my voice rising so the detective could hear me. "The milk you made with nutmeg and cinnamon, just the way I like it. Except you added a new ingredient, didn't you, Thad?" "Please," she whispered. "I had it analyzed this morning at the lab," I continued, my voice hard as iron. "Do you know what they found? It wasn't nutmeg. It was arsenic-based rodenticide. Rat poison, Bernice. You didn't just want me dead. You wanted me to die foaming at the mouth in my own bed while you pretended to sleep down the hall." The gasps from the congregation were audible. People recoiled. To kill a man is one thing. To poison your husband with a glass of warm milk is a level of intimacy and betrayal that turns the stomach. "That is not true," she shrieked, but her voice was thin and reedy. "You planted that. You are trying to frame me." I looked at the detective. "Officer," I said, "this vial contains a lethal dose of poison administered by this woman. I also have an audio recording of her discussing the dosage with her daughter-in-law. She is not a hostage. She is not a victim. She is a co-conspirator in attempted murder. The detective stepped forward. He didn't look gentle this time. There is no chivalry for poisoners. Bernice King, you are under arrest, he said, grabbing her arm. Bernice screamed. It wasn't a word. It was a raw sound of terror. She tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. She tried to claw at the officer, but he spun her around and clamped the cuffs on her wrists. Thad, she screamed. Thad, I am your wife. We have a life together. Don't do this. I love you. I watched them drag her down the aisle. Her heels scraped against the stone floor, leaving black scuff marks on the pristine surface. She passed the pew where we had sat for Easter services, for Christmas masses, for weddings. She passed the people she had tried to impress for 20 years. And not a single person reached out a hand to help her. I love you too, Bernice, I whispered to the empty air. That is why this hurts. But love doesn't mean letting you kill me. As the doors swung shut behind her, wailing form, a silence fell over the church again. The air felt lighter, cleaner, as if a sickness had been purged. But we weren't done. I turned my attention to the front row. Tiffany was still sitting there. She hadn't moved during the chaos. She had sat perfectly still, clutching her purse, her eyes fixed on the floor. She looked like a statue of piety. She thought she was safe. She thought she was the smart one. She had delivered the evidence against Dante. She had played her part. She stood up slowly. She smoothed her black dress. She picked up her purse and turned toward the side exit, the one that led to the parking lot. She moved with the confidence of someone who has just pulled off the greatest heist of their life. She walked past the police officers, keeping her head down, trying to make herself invisible. She was 10 feet from the door when I spoke. Going somewhere, Tiffany. She stopped. She stiffened. She turned around slowly, a forced, tight smile plastered on her face. Thaddeus, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I just can't handle this. It is too much. I did what you asked. I brought the receipt. I brought the bottle. It is all on the pew. I need to go. I walked toward her. My cane clicked against the floor. You did good, Tiffany, I said. You gave us everything we needed to lock Dante away for 20 years. She let out a breath of relief. I am glad I could help, she said. I tried to stop him. Thad, you have to believe me. I was scared. I nodded slowly. I know you were scared. You were scared of the cartel. You were scared of being poor. And you were scared of getting caught. Her smile faltered. What do you mean? I mean that there is no flight to Paris today? I said. She took a step back. How do you... I know about the ticket, I said. I know about the account in the Cayman Islands. And I know about the deal you thought you made with the anonymous caller on the phone. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the burner phone. I held it up. You thought you were negotiating with a stranger, I said. You thought you were buying immunity, but you can't buy immunity from the man you tried to bury. Her eyes went wide. She looked at the phone, then at me. The realization hit her like a physical blow. It was you, she whispered. It was me, I said. But we had a deal, she hissed, dropping the facade. Her face twisted into a snarl. You said if I gave you the evidence, I could walk. You gave me your word. I gave you a text message. I corrected her. And besides, I didn't lie. I said the evidence would destroy Dante. And it did. But I never said I would forget what you did. I signaled to Vance. He stepped forward, handing a tablet to the detective. This is the audio from the living room, Vance said, the night before the attempted poisoning. This is the voice of Tiffany King outlining the plan to file a false police report, commit Mr. King to a mental institution and seize control of his assets through a conservatorship. She is the architect detective. Dante was the muscle. Bernice was the distraction. But this one, she was the brain. Tiffany looked at the detective. She looked at the exits. She looked at me. You can't do this, she screamed. I am the witness. I turned state's evidence. I have rights. You are not a witness, Tiffany, I said, my voice cold and final. You are an accomplice. Actually, you are worse. You are the mastermind who got cold feet. In my book and in the eyes of the law, the one who plans the murder is just as guilty as the one who holds the knife. She tried to run. It was a pathetic attempt to scramble toward the heavy oak door. But she was wearing 6-inch heels and she was panicked. She tripped before she even made it 3 steps. 2 officers were on her before she hit the ground. "Get off me!" she shrieked, kicking and scratching. "This is a trap. He trapped me." I walked over to where she was pinned on the floor. I looked down at her. "It wasn't a trap, Tiffany," I said. "It was a mirror. I just held it up and let you see yourself." They hauled her up. She was crying now, tears of pure rage. She looked at me with eyes that burned with hatred. "I hope you die alone, old man," she spit at me. "I hope you rot in this big empty house with your money." I watched them take her away. The church was finally empty of the traitors. The air was still. The rain continued to beat against the roof, washing the city clean. I stood there for a long moment, leaning on my cane. Vance walked up to me. He looked tired. "It is done, Thad," he said softly. "They are all in custody. The DA is already drafting the charges. They won't see daylight for a very long time." I nodded. I looked at the empty pews. I looked at the empty casket. "We won," Vance said. "You kept the business. You kept the money. You kept your freedom." I looked at him. I felt a deep, aching exhaustion settle into my bones. "I kept the things, Jeremiah," I said, "but I lost the people." I turned and walked toward the door. The show was over. The audience had gone home, and the king was back on his throne. But as I walked out into the rain, I realized that a throne is a very lonely place to sit when the castle is empty. "Let's go," I said to Vance. "I have a company to run, and I need to buy some new locks for the front door." We walked out into the gray afternoon. The war was over. I had survived. But survival, I was learning, leaves scars that no amount of money can heal. I got into my Shelby, turned the key, and listened to the engine roar. It was a good sound. A strong sound. It was the sound of a life that kept moving forward no matter what tried to stop it. And for today, that was enough. 7 days. That is how long it took to dismantle a life that they had spent 20 years leeching off of. Most people think that when the handcuffs go on, the punishment begins. But prison is just a pause button. The real punishment happens on the outside. It happens to the things you left behind. It happens to your name, your credit, and the false empire you built on someone else's foundation. I sat in the boardroom of King Industries, a room with glass walls overlooking the Chicago skyline. Jeremiah Vance sat across from me, a stack of legal files between us. We weren't preparing a defense. We were executing an eviction. The criminal charges were sticking: attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud. But I wasn't satisfied with them just losing their freedom. I wanted them to lose the illusion that they had ever owned anything. "Execute the clause," I said, tapping the mahogany table. Vance nodded. He didn't smile. This was grim work, but it was necessary. The foreclosure notice on the Maple Avenue house. Technically, Bernice had forged my signature to get the loan, but the house was still in my name, and since the bank now knew the loan was fraudulent, they called in the debt immediately. Bernice obviously couldn't pay it from a jail cell, and I certainly wasn't going to pay it to save a house where my wife tried to poison me, so I let it burn. I authorized the bank to seize the property. I wanted the neighbors to see it. I wanted Mrs. Higgins across the street to see the sheriff's deputies taping the orange foreclosure notice to the front door. I wanted the movers to carry out the Italian leather sofas Bernice loved so much and load them into a repo truck. I wanted the physical space where they plotted my death to be stripped bare until it was just drywall and echoes. Then came the cars. Dante loved his car. It was a status symbol. It was his identity. He had leased it under the company name, claiming it was a work vehicle. I revoked the lease. I stood by the window of my office and watched the tow truck pull into the lot below. It wasn't Big Mike this time. It was a repo company. They hooked up Dante's sports car, the one he used to drive to the casino, the one he sat in while he planned how to sell my warehouse. As they hoisted it up, the alarm went off. It blared rhythmically, a dying mechanical scream. No one came to turn it off. I watched them tow it away to the auction block. Everything they had, everything they touched was being erased. The credit cards were canceled. The bank accounts were frozen. The club memberships were revoked. In 1 week, I turned them from social climbers into paupers with criminal records. But the final screw had to be turned in person. I needed to see him, not to gloat. I don't believe in kicking a man when he is down, but I do believe in making sure he knows exactly why he is on the ground. I drove to the Cook County Jail. The building is a fortress of gray stone and misery. It smells of industrial cleaner and unwashed bodies. I checked my gun at the entrance lockers. I was a licensed carrier, but even I couldn't bring iron inside. I walked through the metal detectors. I waited in the processing room. When they finally buzzed me into the visitation area, I sat behind the thick plexiglass. I picked up the heavy black phone receiver. It felt cold against my ear. A door buzzed on the other side. A guard led Dante in. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 7 days. The swagger was gone. The expensive suit was replaced by a beige jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. His hair was unwashed. He had a bruise on his cheek, a dark purple blossom under his left eye. He walked with a limp. He sat down. He didn't pick up the phone immediately. He just stared at me. His eyes were red-rimmed with dark circles. He looked terrified. Not just jail-scared. He looked hunted. He picked up the phone. His hand was trembling. "Dad," he whispered. I didn't correct him this time. I just looked at him. "You look terrible, Dante," I said. He let out a sob that fogged up the glass between us. "You have to get me out of here," he pleaded. His voice was high, frantic. "You don't understand. They know I am here. Who I ask, though I already knew." "The red line," he hissed, looking over his shoulder at the other inmates in the room. "The guys I owe. They have people inside Thad. They know I didn't deliver the warehouse. They know the deal is dead." That bruise on my face. That was a welcome message from a guy in the laundry room. He said the interest rate just went up. He leaned in, pressing his forehead against the glass. "They are going to kill me, Dad. They said if I don't come up with 50 grand by the end of the week, I am going to have an accident in the shower. You have to bail me out. Please. I will disappear. I will go anywhere. Just pay the bail. Pay the debt. I am begging you." I listened to him beg. I watched the tears track through the grime on his face. This was the boy I had taught to throw a baseball. This was the boy I had bailed out of drunk driving charges when he was 20. This was the boy I had hired, promoted, and protected, and every time I had saved him, he had hated me a little more for it. He didn't see my help as love. He saw it as weakness. He saw me as a resource to be mined, not a father to be respected. I leaned forward. "Dante, look at me." He looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. He thought he had me. He thought the old Thad, the soft-hearted Thad, was surfacing. "You owe $50,000 to a car theft ring," I said, "and you are facing 20 years for attempted murder." Yes, I know," he cried. "But you have the money, Thad. You have millions. 50 grand is nothing to you. You can save my life. I have the money," I agreed. "I have a lot of money. I made it by building things. I made it by fixing things that were broken." I paused. "But I don't fix things that are rotten, Dante. I throw them away." The hope in his eyes died. It was replaced by a cold, dawning horror. "What? What are you saying?" "I am saying that I am not posting your bail," I said calmly, "and I am certainly not paying your gambling debts." "But they will kill me," he screamed. The guard behind him took a step forward, warning him to keep it down. "That is between you and your creditors," I said. "You made a business deal, Dante. You promised them something you didn't own. Now you have to deal with the breach of contract." He slammed his fist against the glass. "I am your son," he shouted. "How can you leave me here to die? I am your family." I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I looked down at him, this 32-year-old child who had never taken responsibility for a single action in his life. "You stopped being my family the moment you crawled under my car with a pair of wire cutters," I said. He froze. The mention of the act seemed to suck the air out of his lungs. "I didn't just fire a bad employee, Dante," I continued. "I fired a traitor. You wanted to inherit my life. You wanted to be the big man. Well, here is your chance. Being a man means cleaning up your own messes." I started to hang up the phone. "No, wait, Thad, Dad, please." I held the receiver halfway to the cradle. "And one more thing," I said. He looked at me, desperation etched into every line of his face. "Stop calling me Dad," I said. "I am not your father. I am the man who survived you." I hung up the phone. The click was final. Dante started screaming. He slammed his hands against the glass, mouthing words I couldn't hear, but I knew what they were. He was cursing me. He was begging me. He was bargaining with a God he hadn't prayed to in years. The guards grabbed him. They pulled him back. He struggled, his eyes locked on mine, wild with panic. He looked like a drowning man watching the only lifeboat row away. I turned my back on him. I walked out of the visitation room. I walked down the long gray corridor. I retrieved my gun from the locker. I walked out into the sunlight. The air outside tasted sweet. It tasted of gasoline and freedom. I got into my car. I checked my phone. There was a message from the bank. The foreclosure on the house was complete. The locks had been changed. I deleted the message. I didn't feel guilt. People talk about unconditional love, but love is a two-way street. You cannot love someone who is holding a knife to your throat. You cannot save someone who is trying to drown you to use your body as a raft. I had cut the cord. It was a surgical procedure. It was painful, yes. But the patient, my life, my legacy, my sanity, was going to survive. Dante was on his own. He was about to learn the hardest lesson of all, a lesson I had learned in the jungle 50 years ago. When you declare war, you better be ready to die. He had declared war on me. He just didn't realize that he was fighting a veteran, and he was just a tourist. I started the engine. I had a meeting with my production manager at 2. We had a new contract to fulfill. Life went on. Business went on. And for the first time in a long time, the books were balanced. The dust had barely settled in the boardroom of King Industries. The police reports were filed, the lawyers were billing their hours, and the silence in my office was finally returning to the respectful quiet of a place where business gets done. I sat in my leather chair looking out at the Chicago skyline, feeling the weight of the last week pressing down on my shoulders. I was a man who had won a war but lost his country. My house was empty. My family was in cells. My legacy was secure, but there was no one left to share it with. My intercom buzzed. It was my executive assistant, Sarah. Her voice sounded hesitant. "Mr. King, there is a man here to see you. He says it is urgent. He says his name is Ray. He says he has family." I frowned. I didn't have any family left. They were all wearing orange jumpsuits at the county lockup. "Send him in," I said. The door opened and a man walked in who looked like a bad copy of a memory I had tried to erase 30 years ago. He was tall, thin, with a face that had been eroded by years of cheap whiskey and bad decisions. He wore a suit that was 2 sizes too big and smelled of mothballs and stale cigarettes. His eyes were watery and shifting, scanning the room, assessing the value of the paintings on the wall, the rug on the floor, the watch on my wrist. It was Ray, Bernice's ex-boyfriend from before we met, the man she swore she had left behind, the man who had been a ghost in the background of my marriage for 3 decades. He walked up to my desk, trying to project a confidence he didn't possess. He didn't offer to shake my hand. He just leaned on the back of one of the guest chairs, sneering slightly. So he said, his voice raspy, "You are the great Thaddeus King. You don't look like much, just a mechanic in a fancy suit." I didn't rise. I didn't blink. "Can I help you, Ray? I heard about Dante." Ray said, "I heard you put him in a cage. I heard you set him up." "I put him where he belongs," I said calmly. "He is a good boy," Ray spat. "He just got mixed up. He needs guidance. He needs his father." I leaned back in my chair. I was his father for 30 years, Ray. I guided him. I educated him. I saved him. And he thanked me by trying to kill me. "You aren't his father," Ray interrupted, a smug grin spreading across his face. "You are just the bankroll. I am his father. I am his blood." I stared at him. He thought this was a revelation. He thought he was dropping a bomb that would shatter my world. He thought that by revealing his biological claim, he would somehow gain leverage over me, perhaps guilt me into releasing the purse strings. He puffed out his chest. "Bernice told me, years ago. She told me Dante was mine. We had a thing, you know. Right when you two started dating. She wasn't sure, but I knew. Look at him, Thad. He has my nose. He has my eyes. He is a survivor like me." He paused, waiting for me to react. Waiting for me to scream, to deny it, to break down in tears at the realization that my son wasn't my son. I opened the top drawer of my desk. I didn't pull out a gun. I pulled out a single yellowed envelope. The paper was brittle with age. It had been sealed for a very long time, but I knew exactly what was inside. I tossed the envelope onto the mahogany desk. It slid across the polished surface and stopped right in front of Ray's frayed cuffs. "Open it," I said. Ray looked at the envelope confused. He picked it up with nicotine-stained fingers. He tore it open. He pulled out the document. It was a paternity test result from a clinic that had closed down 20 years ago, dated 1994. He read it. His eyes went wide. You knew," he stammered. I stood up then. I walked around the desk until I was standing right in front of him. I towered over him, not just in height, but in presence. I knew before he could walk. I said, my voice low and dangerous. I knew before he said his first word. I had my suspicions. Bernice was always slippery with the truth. So I took a swab, I sent it to the lab, and I got that piece of paper. Ray looked from the paper to me, then why, he asked. Why did you stay? Why did you raise another man's kid? Why did you give him your name? Because when I looked at that little boy, I didn't see you. I said, I saw a child who needed a father. I saw an innocent life that didn't ask to be born to a liar and a drunk. I made a choice, Ray. A choice you were too weak to make. I chose to be his father. Biology makes you a donor. Love makes you a dad. I changed his diapers. I taught him to ride a bike. I sat up with him when he had fevers. I paid for his college. I did the work. I snatched the paper back from his hand. So don't you come into my office and talk to me about blood, I growled. Blood is cheap. Loyalty is expensive. And Dante went bankrupt on loyalty a long time ago. Ray stepped back intimidated. He licked his lips, realizing his moral high ground had just evaporated. He shifted tactics. He was a hustler after all. Fine, he said, straightening his jacket. You knew. Whatever. But that doesn't change the law. I am his biological father. If you are disowning him, if you are throwing him away, then I am here to claim his rights. His rights, I asked. He has assets. Ray said, his greed showing through. He has a trust fund, right? He has shares in this company. If he is going to prison, someone needs to manage his affairs. Someone needs to make sure he has money for his defense. I am his next of kin. I am here to take over. I looked at this man, this pathetic small man who had crawled out of the woodwork, not to help his son, but to rob him. He thought Dante had millions stashed away. He thought he could act as a proxy and siphon off the wealth while Dante rotted in a cell. He is your son, isn't he? I asked. Ray nodded vigorously. 100%, that paper proves it. And you want to take responsibility for him? You want to step up and be the father now? Absolutely, Ray lied. I want to do right by him. I smiled. It was a cold smile. Good, I said. I am glad you are here, Ray, because Dante left a lot of loose ends. And since you are claiming him, since you are asserting your biological rights, you can assert his liabilities too. I walked back to my desk and picked up a thick, heavy folder. I dropped it into Ray's hands. It was heavy enough to make him grunt. What is this? Ray asked. That is his inheritance, I said. Ray opened the folder. He expected checks. He expected deeds. Instead, he saw invoices. The top one is the bill from the private investigators I hired to track his embezzlement, I explained. $200,000. I am billing that to him. The next one is the invoice for the car he leased in the company name and then destroyed. $80,000. Ray flipped through the pages, his face paling. And those thick ones at the back, I pointed. Those are his gambling debts. The Red Line Gang. $50,000, plus interest. They came to see me yesterday. I told them Dante has a new manager. I told them his real father was in town and was eager to settle his accounts. Ray looked up, terror in his eyes. You told the mob? I told them Ray was taking over, I said pleasantly. I gave them your description. I think there is a guy waiting for you in the lobby right now. Big guy. Neck tattoos. Looks impatient. Ray dropped the folder. Papers scattered across the floor. You can't do this, he shouted. I don't have this kind of money. I am broke. You wanted him, I roared, slamming my hand on the desk. You walked in here claiming blood. You wanted the glory of being a king. Well, that is the price. That is what your son built. He didn't build a fortune, Ray. He built a mountain of debt and enemies. I walked him to the door. I didn't touch him. I didn't have to. The weight of the truth was pushing him out. He is your son, Ray, I said, opening the door. His blood is your blood. His debt is your debt. Go be a father. Go save him. Ray scrambled into the hallway. He looked left and right, terrified of who might be waiting for him by the elevators. He didn't look back at me. He ran. He ran from the responsibility he had claimed to want, just like he had run 30 years ago. I closed the door. I walked back to the window. I looked at the paternity test still sitting on my desk. For 30 years I had kept that secret. I had let Dante believe he was born into greatness because I wanted him to feel worthy. I wanted him to feel like he belonged. I thought that if I loved him enough, the biology wouldn't matter. But I was wrong, not because biology matters, but because character matters. Dante wasn't Ray's son because of DNA. He was Ray's son because he was a coward. He was Ray's son because he chose the easy way out. He was Ray's son because when the pressure came, he broke. I picked up the yellowed paper. I walked over to the shredder in the corner. I fed the paper into the machine. I watched as the proof of my 30-year lie turned into confetti. It was over. The house was clean. The traitors were gone. The leeches were gone. I was 72 years old. I was alone in a glass tower. But as I looked out at the city I had helped build, I didn't feel lonely. I felt light. I picked up my phone and dialed Big Mike. "Mike," I said, "get the crew together and find some young kids from the trade school who need apprenticeships. I have a lot of empty offices up here. It is time we filled them with people who actually want to work." I hung up. I wasn't a father anymore. But I was still a builder, and tomorrow I was going to start building something new, something that couldn't be poisoned, couldn't be stolen, and couldn't be broken. I sat down and got back to work. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the room. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the dark. I knew what was in it, and I had already beaten it. This is Thaddeus King signing off. Watch your back, check your brakes, and never ever let them see you bleed. 6 months have passed since the day I walked into my own funeral and watched my family crumble into dust. The seasons have turned. The gray, weeping skies of spring have given way to the brutal, honest heat of a Chicago summer. I stand behind the floor-to-ceiling glass of my office, looking down at the factory floor. It is a view I have looked at for 40 years, but today it looks different, brighter, cleaner. Down below, the sparks from the welding torches fly like fireflies in a jar. The sound of the hydraulic presses stamping out steel is a rhythmic mechanical heartbeat that shakes the floorboards under my feet. For years, Bernice told me this noise gave her a headache. She told me the smell of ozone and hot metal was disgusting. She wanted me to sell it to trade this symphony of industry for a silent condo in Florida and a slow death by boredom. But today, listening to the roar of the machines, I realize it is the most beautiful music I have ever heard. It is the sound of life. It is the sound of honest work. And most importantly, it is the sound of things that cannot lie to you. Steel doesn't smile to your face while holding a knife behind its back. An engine doesn't plot to kill you because it wants your insurance money. Machines are loyal. If you treat them right, they run forever. If you neglect them, they break. It is a simple, fair contract. Unlike marriage. Unlike fatherhood. My intercom buzzes. It is Sarah, my assistant. She has been with me for 15 years, and she is the only woman in my life now who has access to my checkbook. Mr. King, the lawyer, is here with the papers for the foundation. And you have another letter from Stateville Prison. I smile, a dry, humorless twitch of the lips. Send Vance and Sarah, and put the letter in the shredder with the others. I don't need to open the letter to know what it says. It is from Dante. He writes every week. The first few letters were angry, blaming me for his situation. Then they became desperate, begging for money to pay for protection inside. Now they are just pathetic wails of regret. He tells me he is sorry. He tells me he misses the Sunday dinners. He tells me he has found God. I find it interesting how men like Dante always find God when they run out of other options. But God can't pay his gambling debts, and neither can I. As for Bernice, she doesn't write. I heard through the grapevine that she spends her days in the prison laundry folding sheets. I hope she thinks of me every time she folds a white one. I hope she remembers the silk sheets she used to sleep on and realizes that the rough cotton in her hands is the price of her greed. Tiffany is in a different facility, filing appeal after appeal, blaming everyone but herself. She will be old before she sees Paris. Jeremiah Vance walks in. He looks relaxed, younger than he did 6 months ago. Winning the biggest case of his career has put a spring in his step. He is carrying a thick leather portfolio. "Morning, Thad," he says, pouring himself a coffee. Or should I say, Mr. Chairman? Just Thad is fine, Jeremiah. You know I don't like titles. Vance sits down and spreads the documents on my desk. "This is it," he says. "The final charter for the scholarship program. We have set up the trust to be irrevocable. $5 million to start with an annual infusion from the company profits." I look at the papers. The text is dense, full of legal jargon, but the title at the top is bold and clear. The Thaddeus King Opportunity Fund, and underneath it the tagline I insisted on, "Not for the lazy." Vance pointed to the tagline and chuckled. "Are you sure about that name, Thad?" The marketing team thought it was a bit aggressive. I pick up my pen. It is a heavy gold fountain pen. I am not running a charity for people who want to hand out Jeremiah. I am running a ladder for people who are stuck in a hole but are willing to climb. I want the kids who have grease under their fingernails. I want the kids who work 2 jobs to help their mothers. I want the kids who know that the only thing in life you actually own is what you earn. I sign my name at the bottom of the page. The ink flows smoothly, black and permanent. This money isn't for Dante, I say, closing the folder. It is for the Dantes who could have been if they had been raised right. Or maybe if they had just been born with a spine. Just then there is a knock on the glass door. It opens and a young man walks in. He is wearing a blue work uniform with the name Jamal stitched on the pocket. He is 19 years old. He is one of the new apprentices I hired from the trade school program. He is holding a complex gear assembly in his hands, his face smeared with oil, his eyes bright with curiosity. Mr. King, Jamal says, hesitating. The foreman said you wanted to see the prototype for the new transmission valve. Come in, son, I say, waving him over. Put it on the desk. Don't worry about the polish. Jamal places the heavy metal part on my mahogany desk. He looks nervous. He knows I am the owner. He knows the rumors about what happened to the last person who tried to cross me. I pick up the gear. I inspect the teeth. I run my thumb over the welding seams. They are perfect. Smooth, strong, flawless. You did this, I ask. Yes, sir, Jamal says. It took me 3 tries, but I got the tolerance down to 0.01. I look at him. I see the pride in his eyes. I see the fear of failure, but also the hunger to succeed. I see a young man who respects the work. I open my desk drawer and pull out a cigar. I don't light it. I just hold it. Jamal, I say, do you know why I fired my own son? Jamal swallows hard. I heard stories, sir. I fired him because he thought this business was a bank account. I say, tapping the gear. He looked at this piece of metal and saw a dollar sign. You look at it and you see a machine. You see how it fits. You see how it works. I reach into my pocket and pull out a key card. This is for the executive washroom, I say, tossing it to him, and tell the foreman to give you a raise. You are now the lead on this project. Jamal's jaw drops. Thank you, Mr. King. I won't let you down. I know you won't, I say softly. Because if you do, you know I will fire you, and I won't hesitate. He laughs, realizing I am joking, mostly. He grabs the gear and runs out of the office beaming. I watch him go. That is the future. Not blood, not DNA, but spirit. That boy is more my son than Dante ever was, because he shares my values, not just my last name. I stand up and walk back to the window. The sun is setting over the city, casting long shadows across the skyscrapers. The world is turning. The traffic is moving. Life goes on. I am 72 years old. I live alone in an apartment downtown now. I sold the big house on Maple Avenue. It had too many ghosts. I have a dog. I have my cars. I have my work. Some people might look at me and see a lonely old man. They might pity me because I have no wife to cook dinner, no children to come visit on holidays. But they are wrong. I am not lonely. I am free. I used to think that family was the most important thing in the world. I used to think that you stick by your blood no matter what. I used to think that a man's legacy was defined by who cried at his funeral. I was a fool. I press my hand against the cold glass, looking at my reflection. The man staring back is older, yes. He has more scars. But his eyes are clear. I used to think family was blood, but now I know family are the people who don't cut your brakes while you sleep. Family are the people who don't poison your milk. Family are the people who stand beside you when the world is burning, not the ones lighting the match. I turn off the lights in my office. The darkness is comforting. I am Thaddeus King. I survived the jungle. I survived the poverty. And I survived my own family. The king is back on his throne, and this time the castle is secure. Betrayal never comes from your enemies. It always comes from those you invite to your table. We spend our lives building castles for our loved ones, only to realize some of them are just waiting to sell the bricks the moment we close our eyes. True wealth isn't the millions in the bank or the properties you own. It's the ability to wake up in the morning knowing the person in the mirror didn't compromise their dignity for greed. Protect your heart, but never forget to protect your brakes. Blind trust is a luxury even the richest man cannot afford. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you know. And I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to cut toxic family out of your life to save yourself? Let me know your story in the comments below. Stay strong, stay sharp, and I'll see you in the next video.